15th of September. Just a few notes before we kick off. Please note that the proceedings today are being recorded and live streamed to the public. And before we proceed, I would like to just lay out, we're following the normal set pattern. If you would like to speak, raise your hand during the meeting and I will bring you in. And please make sure that your mobile phones and computers are set to silent. Thank you. We'll now move on to our first item, which are apologies. So, Ross, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Shopak, Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Roger, Sharon Minty, the independent member for Cornwall, Councillor Tilby and Councillor Worth is substituting, Councillor Hayden and Councillor Coker is substituting. Fran Hughes, Chief Exec of the OPCC, is unable to join us today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. And just to mention that Fran Hughes has emailed me as Chair and looking forward to joining the panel again in the new year. So I'm sure we'll be very glad to see her back then. Moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting. And we'll go through page by page. For accuracy and matters arising. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. 4. Councillor Pemberley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not quite sure where in page 4 or 5 or 6 this might fit, but I just wonder whether the minutes are explicit enough about a couple of points and a point of action that was promised that doesn't appear to have happened. I think it's point Q, but where we talked about the costs of processing applications against the income received, and we explicitly asked, I think, and I think the Commissioner agreed that she would see if that could be provided to us so we could also lobby on behalf of the police, because, you know, as councils, our licensing activities are meant to cover the costs, whereas in this case, it appears they don't. That I don't think is explicit enough in here, so that would probably have not triggered a response. I think it did, however, in point P, say that we would be sent the Commissioner's draft response to the consultation, and I don't think we saw it, so that meant that we weren't able to potentially back the Commissioner's things, so it might be useful if we could at least see the final response. But it's quite useful if we're offering to support the Commissioner if that sort of paperwork is provided, because otherwise we're not able to add the potential response of a whole load of councils to the Commissioner. I think we were in a lot of agreement on that. And the final thing that I'm not sure is here very explicitly is that we did have a debate about the issuing of temporary licences, because in your report last time, Commissioner, you had talked about the fact that for some reason Devon and Cornwall seem to issue more temporary licences than other areas, and we had asked, I think, for you to be able to have a conversation with the Chief Constable about whether that practice could be stopped, and whether when people were late in applying for temporary licences, their guns could be surrendered until a permanent licence could be issued. I don't think that is explicitly represented enough here in order for you to have been able to go and have that conversation. So I just wondered whether we could make a specific note of those items so that we can enable the Commissioner to take those bits forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And is everybody happy that that is the case and those comments are reflected in the minutes of the next meeting? Yep. Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll move on. We're on page 4, I think. Page 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. 13. 14. 15. 16. 17 and 18. And before I propose those minutes, the whole meeting last time was an emergency or an extraordinary meeting due to a cancelled meeting in early, when was it now? Early, time goes so quickly, July. Just to emphasise it, it is very important to get substitutes in when you cannot attend a meeting. It has been suggested that the chair, the vice chair, and some of the officers are given delegated authority to communicate with the councillors or the councils that make up this body. Is everybody happy that we are given delegated authority to go ahead with that communication? Yes, thank you. Okay, that's agreed. And from the chair, I would like to propose those minutes as a true and accurate record. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Toms, seconded. All in favour? Yeah. Any abstentions? Thank you. And any against? Thank you. Moving on to item 3, are there any interest to declare at this point? If not, we'll keep that open as and when into the meeting. Thank you. Public questions. I believe there are no public questions today, Ross? No. Okay, thank you. Which leads us into the main items of business today. First of all, we have item 5, which is the antisocial behaviour, policing and operation item. And this is being led by the Commissioner. So over to you, Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the things I think today in particular, the things that grate on our community's lives on a daily occurrence is antisocial behaviour. Whenever we do public surveys, it comes out top. That and drug dealing comes out top in those public surveys. And I think in terms of our efforts jointly and together for our communities, antisocial behaviour is something that none of us can solve on our own, and it is definitely a team endeavour to get to a point where communities feel we are acting appropriately for them. I think it's right that everyone has the right to live without fear of facing antisocial behaviour, to leave their home without fearing intimidation, to shop in a vibrant high street free from disorder and disrepair, and to use and enjoy their parks and public spaces. And I think in terms of a recent report by the local government ombudsman, which some of you may have seen, and if you haven't, I would urge you to read it, called Out of Order, which talks about how many councils are failing in their duties around antisocial behaviour and the responsibilities that councils have to lead and in tackling antisocial behaviour in their communities, even when another agency needs to be referred to deal with it. The oversight must come from the local authority. So you can see this is definitely, we're in this together in terms of tackling it. But what we're going to show you this morning is the Chief Constable's attempt to test the organisation in a sustained campaign for 4 weeks. called Operation Loki to tackle antisocial behaviour. It was targeted in the safer streets areas, so Exeter, Plymouth, Falmouth, Barnstable and Torquay, in order to enhance all of those environmental improvements that we've spent millions of pounds on improving, the CCTV, the street lighting. So it was for the police to do their bit. And we've got Superintendent Emma Butler-Jones, who's going to be speaking with you about that operation and a lot of the learning that's come out of it. And I will hand over to Emma, if you may, who will share a lot of that with you this morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Superintendent Emma Butler-Jones. I'm the head of the Prevention Department and lead for neighbourhood policing. And within that, hold a role around tackling persistent and severe ASB. So as the Commissioner has outlined, the investment in neighbourhood policing, first and foremost, has remained an absolute priority for the Commissioner and for Devon and Cornwall Police. In July 2023, the Chief Constable committed a further police sergeant and 5 police officers to each basic command unit within Devon and Cornwall, which totals an additional 24 officers to support neighbourhood policing and tackle antisocial behaviour and neighbourhood crimes. PCSO numbers have been maintained. We understand the integral role they play in engaging with our communities. A recruitment exercise has just finished, which saw 17 PCSOs pass out in the last couple of weeks. They're now embarking on their tutorship in your communities. And further, the next phase of recruitment is now underway. So as the Commissioner referred to, I led an Operation Loki, to tackle antisocial behaviour back in March, April. This was a targeted neighbourhood policing operation working in partnership within those 6 safer streets areas. The strategic objectives were really quite simple. It was around that proactive engagement with partners and key stakeholders, a visible and proactive policing operation that really utilised intelligence and information to influence our policing tactics, with a focus on that directed action, especially around violence against women and girls and antisocial behaviour, and a real opportunity to engage and connect with our local communities to improve public confidence. So whilst we led the operation force-wide, each area really tailored their activities to target local specific issues, and they deployed a range of policing tactics. So the results, as have been outlined in the report, were really positive. So ASB generally decreased in the target areas. This was often accompanied by some displacement to surrounding areas, which saw Op Loki continue then into other areas, and I'll talk more about our approach going forward in relation to that. Later on. We also saw Op Loki appeared to generally decrease acquisitive crime across the 4 weeks in those target areas without causing that displacement to surrounding areas. So overall decreases in acquisitive crime. We carried out public surveys, which we haven't necessarily done as a policing tactic before. So really involving our communities and understanding what they felt was important to them around antisocial behaviour. 40% of the public surveyed had really noticed that increase in policing presence on the streets, which was really important to us. Like I say, engagement was a fundamental part of this operation as well, and telling people what we do. So around 27,000 members of the public were estimated to have been engaged with. And social media, as we know, was absolutely key to that engagement. So 1.5 million people reached and engaged with on Facebook alone, and just under 400,000 on Twitter. So the most important part for me is sometimes as policing we can do an operation and it can feel like a one-hit wonder and then we move on to the next thing. Op Loki is not that. So Op Loki in its entirety has been adopted as an operation going forward as our response to antisocial behaviour throughout the force. So this has then included a variety of engagement tactics that we found were really successful. So we utilised the OPCC commissioned van to hold pop-up police stations in some of those key areas. We found this to be a really valuable asset and tactic in terms of getting into the hearts of our towns and cities, but also a tactic that we want to deploy into our rural communities as well, as we understand they can be really hard to reach. And so recently a bid has gone in through the OPC's office into the Safer Streets 5 funding to hopefully secure funding for 2 pop-up police stations that will be utilised force-wide to, like I say, really get into those communities further and provide us that mobility. The second thing that we've really invested in is the Community Alert 4 app, which I would really encourage you to expand with your communities. It's a really good opportunity to understand what is going on in the local area. And more broadly, for us, it's a programme of activity that has launched in terms of professionalising that neighbourhood role in relation to antisocial behaviour for both police and partners. Some of that training has already taken place, but we also recognise the importance of focusing our training internally as well. And the Chief Constable has just authorised 2 trainer posts specifically dedicated to neighbourhood training to support this programme of activity as well. Also, in line with the National Antisocial Behaviour Toolkit, we are working to understand how we enforce our antisocial behaviour related powers and work in partnership to focus on that stronger punishment for those serial and serious perpetrators of antisocial behaviour. So that prevention and intervention work continues as a fundamental facet to longer term problem solving. And I guess my plea and ask of you all really is to continue to work in partnership with us all to achieve that balance in terms of intervention and prevention, but also that enforcement of tackling antisocial behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Butler-Jones. And I think just from the report, as you can see that's before you, there's some really interesting statistics that have come out of that operation. Just if you were to look at the drug seizures that they did over that period, you can see that cocaine and cannabis were the ones that were identified as the highest. I know that's in terms of value, but it lets you sort of see what's on the streets for that period of time, sort of gives you a bit of an idea of why we need to be tackling drugs. And I think in terms of the number of stops that they've done, vehicle stops, licensed premises visited, and the fact that it led to 156 arrests, which the aim is not to arrest more people, the aim is to prevent the ASB happening or escalating. So, you know, these are the conversations that we've been having with policing, with my office, the force, and both regionally, is we don't measure success through arrests, we measure success through safeguarding, we measure success by the drugs coming off the street. You know, we don't look at it as it's a need to just try and get more people into custody, unless, of course, that they're clearly causing criminal behaviour and offences. And I just want to say that I think the plan is, how do you go beyond a 4-week campaign? How do you sustain that all year round? And that is some of the head scratching that's going on in the force at the moment. The investment in neighbourhood policing is to assist with that. I think their mind at the moment is to look for a task force that can be deployed across the patches when there's been an escalation in ASB. So there's some thinking about how they can do that. And I think for one issue in particular around antisocial behaviour is, you know, we do these public space protection orders that the councils spend ages consulting on and sometimes getting flack from your communities about what you may or may want to include in those. But what we haven't got right is the implementation and enforcement over those PSPOs. So we are still seeing that, you know, street drinkers are still drinking in those spaces where those orders are in place. And I think we haven't got the relationship right between who's responsible or how we can do that better together. So I think there's some gaps in the way that we work together with councils and the force works with councils in order to try and tackle this further. But I was really pleased to see the effort, and this is about how the Chief Constable's trying to show that they're having regard to the police and crime plan priorities that are set by, fundamentally, the public. So I hope you found that useful, and we can take questions. I'm sure technical and operational questions may be answered by the Superintendent, but if it strays over a line, I'm sure I'll have to answer on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Emma, for that presentation. Councillor Pemberley.
Thanks a lot, and I think antisocial behaviour is one of those issues that people really struggle with, so I'm totally with you on that. A number of occasions recently, listening and being at meetings, members of the public are saying on the self-report form online, instead of using 101, they can't find the thing that they want. And so I think antisocial behaviour is something that we understand, but the public might not see quite what fits within antisocial behaviour. I just wonder whether it could be worth giving a bit of an explanation that aggressive begging should go in antisocial behaviour and things like that. So there's a whole load of stuff that we would class there. And it's fine telling people at a meeting, but actually that means, so some people I know have been saying they weren't reporting. And I've been at meetings encouraging people to, unless it's a 999 issue, to use the online form rather than 101 to take pressure off the 101 service. They'll get the immediate response. They'll get their acknowledgement. They will know, therefore, they've got their paper evidence. If they wish to then come and say no one's doing anything, we can more easily track it if they come to us about it. What I find interesting is that PCSOs are saying, well, why don't you just email us on our neighbourhood team email address? No, it won't count in the statistics, but you'll probably get a faster response. Now, I don't know that that's particularly helpful when in a meeting you've got a councillor saying use the formal reporting mechanisms, and you've got PCSOs saying use our neighbourhood team. And I've heard that from a whole range of people, that actually PCSOs are sort of saying, come to us, you'll get a faster response. So I think it's an operational issue, that the link between neighbourhood teams, and if they're getting reporting, how that then gets into the stats in order to inform the big policy making, because obviously, Commissioner, you won't know about that. And it could be the neighbourhood team have got twice as many ASB incidents as on the 101 because of that sort of action. And it can make it a bit harder. And I know, I've just had a Section 61 issued in my ward, and it was because I was telling everyone to go online and do it, and really emphasising that. And when they said the neighbourhood police team had told me to do this, I said, no, because it won't work. You have to do this. So I think we need consistency of messaging and I think clarity for everyone, both in the police but also outside the police, about what those neighbourhood email addresses are for, and if they are for reporting, how that then goes through to a point where it counts in the stats. So it's sort of a bit of both, because I think we all need that to work.
Thank you, Chair. There's a few things there. So firstly, the challenge with reporting ASB, and you will know this, is some responsibility for noise, nuisance, dog fouling, litter lies with the local authority, and some lies with policing, so vandalism, graffiti, aggressive begging, and what you get is someone's not sure which one they need to tell. So it's not like that with crime. You generally know, you can go to the police and you're reporting a crime. With antisocial behaviour, it is confusing for the public. And if you go onto the council's websites, you're really clear what you deal with. So you go, oh, well, that's not what I want, so maybe it is the police. And I think we have this issue about who do you tell you've got a problem with antisocial behaviour, because you can't articulate it necessarily as, oh, it's definitely a noise nuisance complaint. It's basically my neighbours are doing my head in, I can't sleep at night, and it's a persistent problem, and it's more than just noise, it's other things as well. So I think we generally, this is a national problem, this isn't just a Devon and Cornwall problem with our local authorities, it's a national problem about how do we help people understand how to report antisocial behaviour and where to report. So that is a challenge for us, and I don't think it's perfect at all. But I appreciate the council's websites are really clear about how you report what is relevant to them. Now, whether you act on it is another matter altogether, and that's our challenge, I think, going forward. In terms of the neighbourhood PCSOs, for example, suggesting email them, my professional opinion should be that they should record that, because they have a responsibility under crime data integrity to ensure that they record crimes that come in, and we were left wanting in HMIC FRS's inspection. As you know, we're in engage mode, and actually the recording of ASB was not at its best. It wasn't at very good high confidence levels. So we have got a challenge there, and I suspect there's been a lot of this informal communication going on without the right procedures being followed. My best suggestion, though, would always be report it centrally, but let the PCSO know if you've got their email address that you've just reported it centrally, and then they're aware. For speed, if you're a community member and wanting action, that probably would be the quickest thing to do. And it's good if you've got a relationship with the local policing team, because then they'll trust that you've done some of the right things. And I know as well, since COVID, antisocial behaviour reporting has dramatically reduced. I mean, it went sky high in COVID, or it's partly linked to some of the COVID rules, but it has dramatically reduced. So policing, when they're looking at their numbers, are saying there isn't an ASB problem, it's going down, it's reduced, and it's a lot less than it was before COVID. And I think that's due to the lack of reporting. And I do think some of our communities have given up. So I thank Councillor Penberthy for going to public meetings and letting people know how to report that properly. You know, if I see street drinking in Torquay Castle Circus every single day and I don't report it, I just moan at the police for not taking action, I'm not reporting it. Who's a normal, ordinary person on the street who doesn't know the system? What are they going to do? They've given up. And it's not just there. We've got issues in Exeter City Centre. We've got, you don't feel safe, you're intimidated. And we've got to solve some of these issues about how we help people report. Now, it could well be, panel, we could go away and have a think in terms of the budget process and the commissioning intentions plan of what we need more to do to help on that reporting issue. We have trained, I think the force have trained up at least 500 local policing officers and PCSOs in all of the tools that you can use for ASB. But if we're not getting the community reporting it because they have kind of given up, we've got a big challenge on our hands. So I'm actually going to take that away because we haven't solved that reporting problem yet.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with everything that's just been said, and thank you to Councillor Penberthy for bringing up a lot of those points that you've addressed. Yes, we had Operation Loki in Exeter. I think I mentioned it in the last meeting here, how successful it was and how far it went to making people have a better perception of the city centre, Sidwell Street in particular, which is where it was concentrated. But as we knew and we discussed last time, give it 5 weeks is what everyone said, and it will start getting back to normal, which I believe it has. One of the things I noticed though is what I've heard before from the police sometimes was their frustration in knowing that if they do arrest somebody for ASB or for lower end crime, by the time it's processed, they may get a fine, they may get a warning, they're back on the street almost straight away, and then will carry on doing what they're doing. So I'd be interested to know, was there conversation that went on with the courts? Were they expecting this to happen? Because I have sort of heard that there's some sort of agreements that you can put specific things into place. The courts can, the magistrates can. And I think that may have just happened where there was somebody that's been banned from the city centre recently. So if all of that is able to happen over a course of a couple of weeks, is that part of it still going to happen? So are the police still going to have the confidence to know that they can go and arrest and it will be dealt with in the way it was dealt with further up, or the other side of the table, if you like, by the magistrates, courts or the CPS? So that's one question. Second question, if it's okay. Thank you. I think I spoke last time about our EBAC system, Exeter Business Against Crime with radio system, and previous to the change of software that's come into Devon and Cornwall Police now, and I'm sorry, I can't remember, Tranche? Sorry. Niche. I knew that there was a sh in it, sorry, niche, which is obviously going to be brilliant for the force, but it doesn't speak to the reporting system that the EBAC system has used, the software reporting system, for such a long time. So it's a huge change where businesses were used to all of that information going through to the police, and now it isn't. So they've got to report separately. Is there any thought to that, to being able to get advice of software that will speak to niche, that we could start using, because that's creating a bit of a backlog of people thinking it's been reported and it hasn't, again, mainly with ASB. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So to answer your first question around ASB and how we progress that through the criminal courts. So Partly that's been addressed by some of the training that we've done around raising officers' awareness and partners' awareness of that ASB legislation. The second part, which I'm really passionate about investing in, is, and that we're currently scoping at the moment with our force legal department, is having a speciality lawyer, so an antisocial behaviour lawyer that can advise on cases such as that and help us invest in those files and get them into court and get those banning orders that you talk about. So that's currently underway. The second part, I think you're talking about DISC, which is what businesses have signed up to and is used really well nationally. The single online home, in the interest of the force to try and funnel information through one portal, at the moment we're still under discussion because single online home is the preference for the force. But we understand, and my business crime lead understands, that DISC is a really valuable asset and saves time for businesses and offers more capability in terms of uploading, as you say, CCTV images quickly and statements. So we are still underway with those discussions because we recognise the importance, firstly, of having a single portal, but equally the service that DISC can provide to our businesses and encouraging that business engagement with the force as well.
Councillor Toms.
Sorry, I'm pressing the wrong button here. Commissioner, you remember some months ago I wrote to you about the issue in my own community with shoplifting. It got to a state where shops were wholesale complaining to the local council, and you passed that down and it got to our local inspector, David Ratcliffe, and he emailed me and we got the town council involved and we had a meeting, and from that meeting we then set up a group. We had meetings with the businesses, and we've got a group together in a small community like Lou, which is probably 50 times smaller than some of the places that are on your list, and yet we've done exactly the same as you've just been saying, Emma. You know, we have made sure that the community, if you shoplift from one shop, you're banned from them all. If you're antisocial behaviour in one place, in a pub, you're banned from them all. So we've done what you've done, but on a minute scale. This last Tuesday, we had a meeting with all the people that were involved with Safer Cornwall, the local ASB officer, and community groups, all involved in the meeting, and we've come up with a plan. Our next meeting will be about the major issue that you brought up about drugs, but myself and one of the town councillors have written a report, and it's going to come to you after next Tuesday's meeting at full council, and it will tell you how we did this as a community, and it can be replicated from the smallest community in our area to the biggest community, and it's very simple, and it's engaging with the police in the right manner, and without them we can't do anything. And you know, it will be shared, and I'll share it with all the committee members as well, because I think it's something that maybe you could replicate in, you know, your boroughs or parishes or whatever you've got in different things, because I know there's in Devon it's a two-tier system. That disappeared some years ago in Cornwall, but you know, we'll help you all we can, and you know, I'll send it to you, Emma, because I think, you know, what you're talking about on a grand scale is great, you know, but we've done it minute scale, so hopefully that'll help you. Sorry, you know, it's not a question, it's just trying to be helpful.
Thanks, Chairman. There's a few things that I think becomes apparent, Councillor Toms, in relation to being able to tackle these issues in your community, and it is leadership from the local councillors and it is leadership from the local inspector. It's one of the reasons my office holds and runs the Councillor Advocate Scheme to support councillors to carry out their community leadership role in relation to tackling crime and disorder, and I think it's worked really well in some areas and less well in others, but it is about those two together that makes it work and become a success. Obviously, when I came and visited Lou to talk about the reopening of the front desk, I met the inspector down there with yourselves talking, and the energy involved about what you did to tackle those issues in your community. This is why we are one of the lowest crime rate areas in the country, because we don't tolerate crime, and our smaller communities are probably more mobilised than they are in some of our bigger towns and cities where we have a lot more anonymous and a lot more transient communities. It's a lot harder to tackle. But I just want to thank you for all of your laudable work on that, because it has made such a dramatic difference to the people of Lou and to the shopkeepers. I mean, it is a horrible experience, and you've probably seen it in the news. You know, you've got shopkeepers who are running small shops in deprived communities and are literally having to employ bouncers as their members of staff because they can't deal with the level of shoplifting. And we probably just saw that really dramatic one on the news recently of a shopkeeper, manhandling a female shoplifter, and it was all up in arms about it. But they've had enough. They've really had enough, and they can't tolerate the loss to their business. Then becomes an issue about whether they want to even keep that shop open. So I just want to say thank you for the efforts that they've really made in Lou.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a ever-expanding list here that's growing faster than the Big Bang. So I think I'm going to clump some of the questioners together to increase a bit of brevity. So next we have Councillor Lever, then Councillor Hackett, then I'll invite the Commissioner to reply to both. So Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the report back on this, and I can report from Barnstable that Operation Loki has been noticed and been noticed in a very positive way. You've already talked about there being efforts going into finding how we can continue that sort of level of thing. But for me, the interesting areas are always the edges of things, you know, and it's in terms of ASB, we've talked a little bit already about where the dividing line is between council's responsibility and police responsibility. And I suppose if I continue down that continuum, it's about perhaps having a clearer understanding and it being available for people about where we move from ASB into perhaps criminality. So particularly, I'm aware of in neighbourhoods, we have a particularly difficult situation in one of our more deprived council estates, ex-council estates I should say, where we've actually used the community trigger process because we have had continuing and persistent antisocial behaviour around a drug den, basically. Neighbours too frightened to actually report to the police, going to the housing association, and actually we had a meeting only on Wednesday about this particular case, and we're trying to find a way to enable the residents whose lives are being impacted upon massively by this antisocial behaviour, possibly crime, we don't know. And the problem that we come up with again and again and again is actually how to get the evidence of criminal behaviour that enables for, more long-lasting, more serious impacts to be, no, what am I trying to say, for there to move towards prosecutions of more serious crime. And I don't quite know how that fits in with the ASB, but the starting point for me is the ASB in this particular area and for the families surrounding this. And I'm not expecting you to have an answer about, yes, we can deal with this, but it is very much about how we understand where where it moves from one into the other and how to support communities and us as councils and other partner agencies to address those sorts of things in an effective and lasting way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hackett.
I think in fairness to Councillor Lever, there's so much in there. I think that requires a response first before I come in and ask my question, and the thread of your question is lost. So with respect, Chair, I think Councillor Lever, she should demand her response first.
I think we are running short of time, so we don't want to go on for too long, and we've got a lot of business to get through. So what I would do is I'll indulge on this occasion, Councillor Lever, but I am going to give notice that all questions going forward on this item will then be bunched together. So, Councillor Lever.
Well handled, Chair. Two things I would suggest, Councillor Lever, is firstly, write to my office about that specific case, in case there's anything that we can do to support it as well. I'm pleased to hear that you've used the community trigger. That's what it's there for. I only see that when it's escalated through an appeal, it comes to the council to deal with in the first instance, so I may not have sight of that one. And just to say, I mean, I'll be really frank, when I walked out in Exeter City Centre with the local PC, with the leader of the council, and we wandered around between 4 and 7 of an evening, it was criminal behaviour. It wasn't it's getting badged as antisocial behaviour because there's so many multiple elements to it, but it's clearly criminal, and I think there's been a dismissing of, by the police, of that criminal behaviour and saying it's just antisocial. And even I identified the criminal acts that were taking place in front of me on that evening. So I think I don't think policing is really clear about what's criminal and what's antisocial behaviour, which is why they've had so much training for them to understand. But as I said, I'm going to go away and have a think about what we can do on that reporting issue, because it shouldn't matter to the member of the public which agency do I report to, unless there is not, even if it's not on my it should be on my website, that this is where you go for this is where you go for that. But, then you're not seeing the picture of what's going in that community unless the council and police are talking to each other. So I will take that away, as Councillor Penberthy highlighted today.
Thank you. Councillor Hackett and then Councillor Bradbury.
Thank you, Chair. What I'd like to start in saying is that this is probably one of the biggest issues that our councils collectively have at the moment. And to guillotine the conversation, clearly a number of us, many of us want to speak about this. We need to have a deeper dive into this. I accept you're saying that we haven't got the time now, but I think we could have a meeting all about this issue on its own. It is absolutely expanding, and I do not think we've got the resources currently directed at this. Operation Low Key, and I've got to commend the report that you've done, Superintendent Emma. That was an excellent report. Councillor Lever has said she's worried about what's happening on the periphery of things. Well, the periphery of Barnstaple is Bideford. Time and time again, I've come to this meeting stating the need to retain our PCSOs. The commissioners specifically mentioned PCSOs time and time again. Yet since I've been here on this committee, we have seen the reduction to half of the numbers that we've got now as to when I came in. We've got a joint community safety partnership, CSP, with North Devon, and we used to have funds at our disposal to get street marshals. Now we have to independently bid for funding. North Devon were lucky enough and fortunate enough to get those street marshals. We were not so fortunate. We desperately need them. I came to this meeting a year ago, and on the way up I spoke to my leader, Councillor James, and he said, whatever you do, press for street marshals. I did. And the response was, well, we'll speak about them later. Oh, I'll address that issue later. Well, we have missed the whole of the summer without street marshals for Bideford, for Westwood Hoe, and the surrounding area. We need them. And we've suffered because of it. We've had people urinating in the streets, captured on CCTV, and we've had to find the culprits. We need to have the ability in our local communities, in our local councils, and I hear it's council-led, but we need that ability to direct funds where they're needed. Yes, we have CSAS trained officers in our council, but those officers are trying to do too much. We need to have that ability to respond for our local needs. So how can we have that immediate response? We need the money. We were going to get the Chief Constable to come up and see us only literally a day after his suspension came through. So we need that void addressed. So how can we address this matter urgently now, because we've missed a whole season because of it. So I'd like a response on that, if I may.
Thank you. Councillor Bradbury.
Thank you. I hear what you're saying. From the point of view of our community safety partnership, we've been utilising the majority of our serious violence funding that's been delegated to our area by the Safer Devon partnership to increase our resources and maximise the potential use of community protection warnings to address antisocial behaviour with a focus on serious violence. But it'd be really helpful if what you're saying, we need more funding. We need to be able to address this. And you know, our community safety partnership would be happy to share our findings and outcomes, just to kind of prove this across the force from that point of view. I suppose it's a comment rather than a question, but it's just really welcome that we've had some investment from the Commissioner in the neighbourhood policing. And we did a media campaign in the area and in the partnership around antisocial behaviour, which was really well received. And we acknowledge that Operation Loki, really positive outcomes from it. But we had feedback, particularly within Teambridge, from schools, housing associations and other partners, that this did have a negative impact on the excellent work that's being undertaken with neighbourhood teams and partners. The inspectors really liaised effectively with our central staff and the community safety partnership, but there wasn't much notice provided to partners, so there were opportunities lost from that point of view. We'd really appreciate more planning time and encourage partners to support evaluation of outcomes. I know this is happening in other areas as well. I'm not really asking a question from that point of view. I'm just hearing similar things in different ways from other areas. So I just wanted to feed that back. Any comments would be gratefully received on that, but thank you.
Thank you. So just two questions, sort of kind of similar in the sense that you want more money from policing for your council to be able to tackle antisocial behaviour. That's a bit of a hard ask, I suppose. You know, the bit for me is, and I know you would all support it. If I said I could invest more in PCSOs and the chief could afford to have more PCSOs, you'd just bite my hand off for that in terms of it. Will say, though, that street marshals in particular, obviously we tested them in COVID, didn't we, when we had that, and I paid for loads of areas to be able to have street marshals to give reassurance to the public that they felt safe when they were out, because there was an escalating antisocial behaviour. We were the only area in the country to do this, because there was escalating antisocial behaviour linked to everybody wanting to be outdoors, particularly during the summer. Violence ensued, and so we paid for the street marshals and tested that out for a year. But the ones, when we evaluated that came out top were Plymouth, as always. You've got the Plymouth Against Retail Crime scheme there, where you fund ASB officers, which already had CSAS powers, because I was funding, if you like, the equivalent of a security guard, because that was the speed at which we had to do it. They didn't have CSAS powers, but Plymouth did with their ASB officers, and the impact for policing was huge. The police said they helped us dramatically in Plymouth, and they didn't say that, the police didn't say that about the street marshals everywhere else, and it's because they didn't have the radios, they didn't have the connection, and they didn't have the training. So we know the ones that are employed either by a business improvement district or a local council are the ones that work really well with CSAS powers with policing. I am being lobbied at the moment, Councillor Hackett, from the MP for North Devon about sustained funding for those street marshals, which she believes has had a dramatic impact in Barnstaple. Because it is time-limited funding that we've got from Safer Streets from the Home Office. This is additional money, not out of our local council taxpayers, but out of the government general taxation. And we haven't got an answer for that at the moment. We haven't got an answer for it. But I think there's a few things for me to consider through the budget process. Because you're giving me some thoughts today, and I've spent a lot of money on ASB outreach. I don't know if any of you have pulled that service into your community. I know East Devon have, I know Dartmouth have, but that's an additional resource for you to pull in where you've got gangs of young people causing major problems in your community, and it's been really successful, particularly in Dartmouth. But that's a £250,000 a year contract I've got on that one. That's quite a lot of money. I could rethink some of that. And in terms of the, thank you, by the way, Councillor Goodman-Bradbury, for saying that it has worked, but you want more planning time. It was a bit of a test, as I would say. The Chief Constable said, right, this is an important issue. I want it done, and I want it done quickly. I think it fell on Superintendent Butler-Jones's shoulder to sort this out in a very short period of time. And please plan quickly. So they're used to doing that, and I know it takes a lot longer for local authorities to maybe go through some of your decision process. So I think that's definitely something worth taking back for any future ones, because this has got to be done together. This is the police kind of just went out there. And I think it just needs to be, we go out there as a collective, I think, a bit more closely. And I appreciate you using serious violence money that will have allocated through to Safer Devon, that's then coming down to you. If you're able to use it for the things that you need, that you believe are going to reduce violence in the long term, that is a good use of the money. So at least you've got some access to some things in addition to your own normal budgets. But I think I think I'll finish on that one.
Can I come back, please, Chair? Yeah. I'm very surprised about...
As long as it's brief, Councillor.
As brief as I can be, but I want to make the points. I take on board what you've said, Alison. My concern is that Celine Saxby represents North Devon. We have Sir Geoffrey Cox, and he has not got the visibility in our constituency on this matter that I would like. I would wish for him to speak to me about it, because I will give
Councillor,
him
could you condense this?
Yes,
I
but
understand you're trying to make an important point, and nobody's trying to close down any scrutiny that's going on here, but if you could just condense this a little bit.
I will condense it as much as I can, but I want this point to be made, and it is so important to our council. I'm coming all this way to represent my constituents, represent my council, who feel they are not getting the policing they need. Now, what I would say...
Councillor, we are here to scrutinise the Commissioner and not
absolutely
other MPs.
It's scrutiny, but I'm addressing a void. Now, Torridge District Council was saying that they need these street marshals. It's something I've been to Toby Davis about, and we are saying that they are effective, so I would challenge that. So where is the Police and Crime Commissioner feeling that the evidence isn't there? Because we're putting forward, as a council, that the evidence is indeed there, and they are working. Thank you.
Commissioner?
My suggestion, if they're that good, I think the council should be thinking about how you prioritise your funding to support the funding of those street marshals. The evidence I've used from evaluation is from the COVID street marshals. I haven't seen an evaluation from the Safer Streets funded street marshals yet. So that has yet to come before me about how that's been working for you. But fundamentally, it's if it's that important in your local area, there is nothing stopping the council funding that scheme to do it straight away rather than taking money from policing.
But that money came from the CSP previously, and that money has been withdrawn. Now, for us to find more money from our councils when they're absolutely addressing, we've had a deficit in Torridge, we're paying an additional precept for the police and crime. Surely it should come from that for policing, not from the councils.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And just to point out, we have got item 12 as well later on, which is the work programme. So you're welcome to put any items forward that you feel need a deeper dive. This is the panel's work programme, although the chair and the vice chair have delegated authority of how it operates, we do our best to try and reflect the topics and the priorities of the members. Okay, so moving on to Councillor Coker and then Councillor Worth.
Thank you. Commissioner, myself and you have been out in a particular ward in Plymouth, which kind of tackled what Operation Loki were trying to tackle. I think we did it 2 or 3 times. Are we following up? Because I wasn't going to speak, and yet I've just got 3 emails come through to me, bing, 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 about the work that we did in our area. Because we haven't been back, the emails I've got are, we, because it's me being criticised as well, we only did it as a token. So I know we do these operations, but do we actually compare before and after? Because what I've done as we've gone through this meeting is I've got my local neighbourhood team, our team, all back into another go at this. But I'm just worried that we do events like we did. That's not long-term sustainable. You can't do that every week. So do we evaluate from a police perspective in 6 to 8 weeks' time what these operations have? They always have an immediate effect, but actually long-term, does it just go back to normal? Because we've put a lot of effort into the particular area that we've worked together on, and it just seems to go like that. So I think there is more work that we need to go together between your organisation and local authorities on, once we've done operations like that, how we measure the success and actually how we can work together to make sure residents just think it's just reacting on a one-off.
Thank you, Councillor Coker.
Sorry, I think we're still batching. I slipped then as well.
I know you looked at me, Chair, and I just assumed it.
Sorry. Councillor Worth.
Ironically, we haven't spoken, but this is a very similar point, so good point there. Mine is pretty simple. I've read this, I've looked at the superintendent, and it appears to be really good. You know, this is very, very positive. It's moving forward. So why can't we just get on with it and do it? I detect that if I was managing the team, I think the response from the police officers on the ground is Operation Loki was a good thing. It's definitely coming from the Commissioner. It seems to be the fact when I look at the figures, I'm seeing reduction in crime. So I think there's more we can do with the police through the support through the councillors, the advocates, and I think there's a lot more because that'll be brought out. Was I aware of it? Yeah, sort of, but there's more we can promote. This is a success story. Let's get on with it. And if we can't get on with it, why? What's the gap? Is it funding? Is it procedural? Why can't this be escalated and almost in a sense become the norm? Because I'm very encouraged by what I'm reading, but I don't see enough. Right, come on then, let's do it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner, we have one more question on the questioner on the list. Are you happy to take an extra one? I don't want to overburden you too much, but okay, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know whether it will be for the Commissioner or the Superintendent. My question is around the displacement issue. Now, and it's an excellent report in the first instance, but I wanted to pick up on displacement because whether you're running Operation Loki or whether you're running a normal operation, I mean, ASB displacement, it's a bit like whack-a-mole, isn't it? You hit somebody on the head here and it pops up over there. Now, I know when the police have been active in Councillor Crode's semi-urban area because 3 or 4 nights later, we have issues in our semi-rural area that sits outside of his. So I guess my question is there a strategic or an operational plan that says after we've concentrated specifically on an area, we might then go out actively into the surrounding areas looking for those displacement activities that are likely to occur. Thank you, Chair.
Let's just start with Councillor Coker. So that was a really, we did that under Op Scorpion with a drugs focus, and it was the first phase of Op Scorpion, so they hadn't actually even really done it before. And we're on our 5th phase at the moment now, but the first phase, you know, your ward got some real focus, and you've got a good inspector down there in Paul Leahy, who's absolutely keen to tackle these issues. And I think the bit that was surprising to me that I learned was street drinkers are not harmless people with a drink addiction who are alcoholics. They are, and that was the issue that we found in your ward, they were attracting young people into their crowd, and there was drug dealing occurring. So we also got to stop being so sympathetic to some of the issues that we've got going on our streets, because they're dragging our young people into it. And I wasn't even aware there was drug links to some of the street drinking culture that was going on. And so it was really welcome that we did that exercise. I think the biggest issue about comparing before and after, they do it sometimes, so done it with Op Loki as a corporate entity, and Op Scorpion, because we've done it in different geographies all the time, it has just been a, let's go and have a look, let's go and see what's in there. For the drug side of things, the drugs intel has increased since we started Op Scorpion. So through Crime Stoppers, where people can report anonymously, who we funded to help promote reporting through that channel, we've had more intel on drugs since we started that op. So I think, again, a measure of success for me on that is that people are more confident in coming forward and willing to share that information, which helps the police use their resources more wisely. I think just in terms of, as Councillor Worth has raised, oh my gosh, get on with it. That was the Chief Constable's rant when he was here. Unfortunately, we do not have that Chief Constable in position at the moment. And I know how much you all support him and were part of the process of that recruitment. And I really hope that it's a swift investigation that goes on. So hopefully, he is innocent and he comes back. But fundamentally, he was going for it on that front. And I think in terms of the challenge that we've got, so one is they went ahead and just did something and didn't give partners time to plan. So you probably wouldn't need as many resources as they used for this op, because if they did it a bit more closer with partners, they may get more partner resources to assist with it. Because the problem they've got is they actually pulled officers from other areas. So I can tell you, I had it right in my face about Teignmouth and Dawlish being neglected at a time when Op Loki was happening in Torquay and Paignton, because they pulled off. So I had calls from Ivy Bridge residents telling me we haven't seen our local policing team because they're pulled into helping in Torquay and Paignton. So the bit for me is it's the challenge of how they're moving those resources around in order to make the impact, but they're not at the moment able to sustain it for a long period of time. I think once the officers have all come through their training, which of course we're still recruiting, and they take 3 years, I think once the officers have come through their training and we've got more officers around to put into the teams, it may well make a difference, because the Chief Constable does want to invest more into neighbourhood policing. And as I said, I think the thinking was a bit of a task force that could go and support a local team and keep that activity up. The government have got a strategy in place called Clear, Hold and Build. And they are really clear, especially around drugs. They want to go in and clear it, and they want to hold the line so that it doesn't come back, and then build from that in that community to sustain it going forward. So that approach and way of thinking is definitely in the mind of policing, but it hasn't created the whole corporate mind impact yet. So there's some work to do on that resourcing challenge. And I think better planning with partners, more thinking about how we help the community report those issues. I mean, let's be frank, all of us councillors and elected representatives here, you know exactly where the ASB is happening. You don't need to be told. I could tell you which streets in which towns has got persistent antisocial behaviour problems. Why do the police not see it themselves? And I think this is the challenge we've got. It's so visible in some of our towns and cities that you shouldn't need the community to report it, because it's so obvious. And that's my frustration at the moment in trying to push the police to do their bit. And I know Torbay, Councillor Tymon's here, Torbay has been trying to do that, build that relationship with the policing team, and try and offer what enforcement support the council can give to support policing to play their part. And I've said, if the council leads, the police will follow. And I will keep saying, if the council leads, the police will follow. And if they don't, you can come to me in relation to that. But this is particularly about ASB. Just in terms of, I think that's it. Was that 2? Or did I have 3 questions? Yes. So yeah, the clear hold build thing is the challenge for us, and we're piloting a national project around the clear hold build in Cornwall at the moment. And once that's been piloted, and that's a particular area where they're trying to clear out the drugs, and I think we'll see that expand as we move forward. So there is a government strategy to help with communities on that, and that thinking is coming into policing around a lot of different crime areas, and so it needs to be thought about around ASB as well. But yeah, resourcing challenge is the reason why it can't be fully sustained. And local policing teams are tired. They're small, they're pulled into response to ensure that you're getting your 999 responses, so they're not always available to keep on top of what's going on in that local community, which is why the investment is so important.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I will ask the panel to note the report and the comments and feedback made from the panel be included within the minutes. So I propose from Chair that is noted. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Thomas. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, the Police and Crime Plan scorecard. I think what we're going to do is take that as read. We've all got it circulated, and hopefully we're all up to speed and read it. So that will enable us to sort of prioritise questions. Do I have the panel's agreement for that? Any objections? Thank you. Okay. Straight into questions. Councillor Pemberley.
Thanks. I'm just going to start with a comment rather than a question before I move to my questions, but that's because I raise this every time. We still seem to have an issue about what vehicle noise is. If it's antisocial behaviour, fair enough, but it only happens when vehicles are moving, and therefore it's very difficult for the council to do anything at all. But the police are saying it's a council antisocial behaviour issue, and we go round and round this cycle continually. And I just thought, because you had raised it in this report, I would just mention we need to bottom this out. It's not just in my communities, it's in communities across the whole of the peninsula, and I think we need to find a way to tackle noisy vehicles, because it does cause disruption to residents across Devon and Cornwall. Your help in getting that resolved would be really useful. So that was just a statement, because we've obviously discussed it, but first you'd raised it. When you talk about the drugs landscape, you talk about drugs spreading, but it's really unclear. Is it that Plymouth's now got hardly anything and Tavistock's got just about everything? Or has everyone moved out of Devon and Cornwall and onto the Isles of Scilly? Or is it that everywhere's rising at consistent rates? It's really unclear here for us to be able to get a sense of what that spread looks like, where hotspots are, whether the hotspots change from summer to winter seasons. And I think for us to be able to understand some of that, it might be useful in some of these profile pages to give a bit of a sense of, even if it's only by BCU, where prevalence is across the patch. I think that could help us make some more positive contributions than, as it says on page 53 of our main pack, it is spreading. It brings a greater risk profile. What that looks like, I think, can be quite difficult, especially when we think about dealing, and the Section 61 notice that was served in Plymouth this week. Drug dealing was a really important factor that local residents were reporting, and basically the homeless people involved were dealing drugs that were being dropped off in big black posh cars, and then passing money back through windows. There is a link between drug dealing and vulnerability and the impact that has not only on young people but in the communities where that happens. And I think it would be useful for us all to understand better the issues that are being faced on drugs. So it'll come, I think, to work programming rather than anything, on whether we need a deeper dive into what is happening with drugs across Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, if you are saying that everything is spreading, so it's rising up the risk register. If I leave it at that, I might come back later on others, but I think I just wanted to talk a little about drugs, because they are something that, as has been said, after antisocial behaviour, is the thing that residents are most worried about and talking a lot about.
Certainly. Commissioner.
There's a few bits here. One of the challenges we've got here in actually trying to tackle and understand the drugs picture is that the way the police, and this is regionally in particular, do their drugs threat assessment is it's focused on drug deaths, which leads you to heroin, rather than the other forms of drugs that are in the market where you've got a lack of compliance with the law. So this is a national issue with how policing has received information about what they should be focusing on in relation to drugs. Now, the local profile for Devon and Cornwall is much more nuanced than that, because I've requested it to be on the back of finding out how weak the regional threat assessment was, I believed, looked at. We also have a challenge around the combating drugs partnerships, is that I have 4 in my patch. Now, in other police and crime commissioner areas where they just oversee a county police force, the police and crime commissioner is the senior responsible officer driving that improvement. I can't do 4 myself. So we've got it's led by the local authority public health directors in most places. And I would strongly suggest that you connect with those at a local level, or check the scrutiny of those at a local level. But just in terms of the spread issue, it doesn't mean it's spread all across the patch. It's just that there seems to be more of it, more recognition of it, more understanding of it, of the drug trafficking activity that's taking place. I think you're right, it would be helpful to see a hotspot map, and I think perhaps a future consideration here, because drugs is such a abhorrent thing that is happening in our communities and we're not on top of it, is to have a really good presentation perhaps at a future panel meeting about the drugs challenges that we face. I don't think we've ever done that before, Chair, but I'm thinking that might be a really good way of pulling together the information from those combating drugs partnerships, the regional organised crime unit, and what we do through our regional Ops Scorpion, and actually try and share some of that information with you so that you can see what we're trying to expose in relation to it. And it is commissioners that are driving the exposure of this information, and so that might be something you might want to consider at a future meeting.
And when we come to the work programme later, please have that input, because as a commissioner you're welcome to make suggestions to the panel, so that would be a good discussion. Are there any other questions? Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. My screen has chosen that precise moment to decide to fail. No matter. There's reference under hate crimes in the report, and I can't give you the page number now, I'm afraid, because it's just disappeared. But there was a reference to whether it couldn't be seen as positive or negative, because obviously it might be that people have more confidence in reporting, but also it might be in the way the police are recording. I can't recall whether in your standalone report you referred directly to that. Has there been a difference, is my question, in how the police have recorded? Will that affect the data? Because it's alluded to, but I wasn't quite sure.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of things in relation to the recording of hate crimes. One is obviously there's new guidance about the non-crime hate incidents that has come from the government, so they are now not having to record and act upon non-crime hate incidents, which is actually welcome because this is about people offending each other most of the time, and it was tying up police time. So there's new guidance from the National Police Chiefs College, but that doesn't link specifically to the actual recorded hate crimes. The reason we don't want to put a target or a direction of travel for the recording of hate crimes, it's a bit like domestic abuse victims, is that we see the positive nature of the reporting. Even if it goes up, at least people are telling us what's going on and more of it. But we're not seeing, just to reassure you, we're not seeing spikes in hate crimes. We've got the scrutiny sort of piece of research that we've done at the later on the agenda, and the police have been really good at responding to and tackling hate crime with victims. But just we don't put that we want it to go up or down in relation to that one.
Thank you, Councillor Goodman-Bradbury.
Pressing the wrong one, sorry. Okay, thank you, Chair. From the point of view of homicides, it sounds like a great opening, doesn't it, from that point of view? The analysis would be really useful if we had some kind of record of domestic homicides. There's a high proportion of those deaths considered under domestic homicide. Do they relate to suicide? Or it would be good to have it clearly delineated, I suppose, from that point of view. And I don't know whether that's a question or just a comment, but it would be just ask your thoughts on that. Also, the antisocial behaviour figures on the scorecard, they seem to show a decrease, but it doesn't seem to correlate with what we're seeing in the Community Safety Partnership centred in Teambridge, because we've had a 16% increase on that. So the other point I just wanted to make a comment on, really, perhaps we could also consider domestic homicide review, the data being considered by the panel in future. That's just a suggestion from that point of view. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
I suppose there's just thinking about homicide. So murder is reported as murder, and it'll only be after the fact when the investigation's taken place, whether it's established it's a domestic or... But we don't identify it's a stranger murder versus it's a domestic murder. It's a murder that's being investigated per se. It's only whether it needs a domestic homicide review that it would pull into it. And what I would say is non-domestic murders don't really get a review unless it's taken place in a mental health setting, and there's a mental health murder. There's a review around homicides in mental health settings, our domestic homicide reviews. And so we have, through our serious violence programme, funded, I don't think they're in post yet, I'm sort of, a homicide review officer for somebody to do a much more quicker time review of what's happened with a homicide, because what happens at the moment is it all waits until the domestic homicide review has been completed, which could take years sometimes, and some don't even get that review because they're not in a mental health setting or there wasn't mental health related to it, and they just don't get one. So we've got a homicide review officer that we have recruited. I think, again, we might be the first or second area in the country trying to do that as part of the serious violence programme. I think what would be helpful is to bring a report around the serious violence programme to you, which I can't remember the last time panel might have had one, where we could give an update around that some of those projects that we've been funding through there. In terms of antisocial behaviour, I wonder if you're looking at your council antisocial behaviour reported stats. We're looking here at the police antisocial behaviour reported stats, but it should all come together at a community safety partnership. That's where that happens. So I wonder if it's you're using more data than I'm showing you here in relation to it, because this is from policing stats. So that's why we're not seeing the full picture, are we? We do have the Peninsula Strategic Assessment, which feeds into the next iteration of the Police and Crime Plan, which is done annually. So that is a way to bring all of that data together, and it may be that we could get a bit smarter about what goes into that Peninsula Strategic Assessment, which is run by the CSPs at their level, and then it's brought together as a strategic plan report for me to consider as part of the police and crime plan. So I'll just land that one with you in case there's something at that CSP level we could enhance in readiness for, because the next police and crime plan will be due within the next sort of year to 18 months, because there's obviously an election next May. You have to produce a new one within a year. So there's an opportunity actually to influence that quite heavily.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor Toms.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick one. 1.5, the violent crime, domestic violence, looks pretty static between 2019 to 2023. But the victim certification measure has not been done since November 22. Can we have an update on that? Because, you know, one relates to the other. You know, it stayed pretty static. So, you know, I think, you know, it could be have an update on that. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Toms. I'm surprised Councillor Penberthy didn't lead with this about this data problem that we still haven't fully resolved in terms of the performance report. I think, as we've mentioned about the implementation of the new crime recording system of Niche, that started in November 22. That's immediately when the victims' surveys dropped off and we weren't able to capture that data. We are now, nearly a year later, and we're still not in a position as a force to be able to do that. I've actually raised this nationally with Her Majesty's Inspector at Constabulary, the National Police Chiefs Council and the Home Office only yesterday, that we're not the only force that has this issue with implementing a new crime recording system, and it's not acceptable. I've been made aware that some forces have taken 18 months to get to that position, and I don't think that's a good place for policing to be in. So there's going to be a roundtable discussion with suppliers on a national basis in relation to the issues around some of this data. What I will say is on a day-to-day operational level, it doesn't affect how they're working. What it's stopping us doing is seeing trends, stopping us being able to plan ahead. So that's the gap that we've got at the moment. And I haven't got a time frame for you to say when it will definitely be in place. I've been given some assurances by the acting chief constable that it could be by December or January, but that's not a specific time frame, is it? So I'm on, you know, having to really try and wade through this to try and fix it with the force.
I think our next meeting is November. If we could have just, you know, it's delayed and this is why, that would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I promise to be quick. As always, I love the data, but as always, there's so many different stories that can be underneath that data that you then have to interpret one way or another. So what I'm interpreting at the minute is on part 7.7, reports to Crime Stoppers have gone up by 63%, which is a huge increase. 7.2, number of customer contacts direct to the police force has gone down by 7.4, but the call waiting time, sorry, somebody had to mention it, has gone up again. So are people, well, we don't know the answer to this. It could be that people are going through Crime Stoppers because they think they may get a faster response. So I was just wondering, is there any data on how long do Crime Stoppers have to wait online when they're reporting? What's their average wait time? You know, does the information, I know the info from Crime Stoppers goes direct to the local police force, but there's still going to be a longer turnaround, isn't there, than people actually ringing in direct, perhaps to 101. But I wondered if there was any sort of data on that, why you think that increase is, or do you think people are trying to bypass the system now because it's not working so well with 101 particularly?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'll be really frank. One of the reasons that myself and the 4 other police and crime commissioners in the Southwest region funded Crime Stoppers to take more calls for us was because we developed Op Scorpion to do the drugs, tackling the drugs in our community, and we thought we would be deemed a joke if we said report it in through 101. Because we all have the same issue with our 101 phone service. And we thought people wouldn't take it seriously, that the police do care and want to find out. And because Crime Stoppers is completely anonymous, it actually does work really well on that particular crime type. So that's why they've had the increase. So we've funded them, helped promote them, done quite a lot of work with them. And they do answer their phones quicker, but they have a very strong relationship with each local force. So what they'll do is filter that intel that comes into them, and where they believe it's actionable by the police, they're the ones that they'll send through to the police for information. So the police get it all, but they'll fundamentally prioritise the ones that are actionable or serious. We actually had a terrible domestic homicide murder that was reported by a neighbour on Crime Stoppers rather than ringing 999 because they wanted to be anonymous. And unfortunately, it was too late. But that information got through very quickly. Emergency came through on Crime Stoppers, got through very quickly to the local police force. So that connection is there. That connection is there. Just to give you a little bit of positive news, though, as well, while we've got the 999 call wait times here at the moment, we did reach #1 in the country in August, in the height of summer, for the fastest answering of 999 calls. So I just thought I'd give you that. While I know visitor numbers were down, and there's probably a lot of businesses that were disappointed with that, that and the improvements that they've made in the control room has, I don't know how we've amazingly done that in the busiest summer month and been able to answer the calls the fastest in the country in terms of 999. We just hope that they can sustain that level of service for an emergency. That's probably the best I can give you with answering some of that, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's very positive news. So thank you for delivering that. Councillor Hackett.
Am I live? Yeah. Okay, thank you. The number of issues, there are a plethora of issues around 101, but one statistic I don't know if you can capture, but would be very informative to us, I think, as a panel, is the number of people that phone 101 who give up. Because I get a number of complaints from constituents saying, oh, we phoned up and we couldn't get through and we gave up. Now, the people that give up, we need to know what happens to them, or, do they try alternative means, or do they just simply drop off the system? So is there a way of recording the number of people who try 101, who just simply disconnect for whatever reason? And I think if that number was beginning to drop, and our times began to drop as well, we could see that the 101 system was effective. Do you understand the point I'm making? It's the people that just fall by the wayside and just phone up their local council and say, I just can't get through to the police.
Thank you, Chairman. It is measured, and that's the abandonment rate, as they call it, through 101. I think in the past you've had that. Maybe many years ago we used to measure that and bring that to you. This is literally off the top of my head. Our abandonment rate is poor, high. I'm trying to use the right language. It's not great, because the problem we've got is we can't articulate why they've abandoned. So they could have abandoned to go online because it's promoted to go online. They could have abandoned because they gave up. They could have abandoned because they used web chat. They could have abandoned because they went to the police inquiry office that's reopened in their community. At the moment, what they can't do is measure why. Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary are keen to see that abandonment rate reduce anyway as part of their overall monitoring of the contact service. And I've spoken with the Acting Chief Constable, and he is keeping his eye on that abandon rate. He wants to see that abandon rate go down and have a better understanding of where we do think they're going. So there is a focus on that within the force, just so that you're aware. So while you haven't got visibility of it here, there is a clear focus on that within the force. And just another bit of good news, if any of you remember the AACC 7, which was a system that we'd been trying to implement, I think now for maybe 3 or 4 years, which is the upgrade to the control room, it went live this month. and it seems to be stable. So that's the one that really helps with doing the callbacks, which has already started. For people who can't get through, they can choose to have a callback. And that's been really successful. People have been pleased with that service. So there are ways in which we can sort of get around the problem that we have where people are struggling to get through. We now have, and I know Councillor Crode, when he was chair, must have asked me at every meeting, why can't you just do a callback system? It's in place, it is available, and people can choose that option rather than just abandon the phone and give up.
Yeah, if I could come back on that, well, it exists. I think as a committee, we'd like to see it, and we'd like to see the historic data to see which way it's going, because that is one of going to be our key indicators about the effectiveness of it. So could that be presented at our next meeting?
Thank you. And also to add to that, presumably these are ranked to national performance as well, so the abandonment rates in other authorities, no? With Councillor Hackett's request, would that be possible to bring that information to the next committee? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Pembervey, you opened up questions, and it looks like you're finishing them on this item, so thank you.
Thanks. I'm sort of picking up on the latest theme, and Commissioner, I hate to be predictable and come in with what you think will be my first comment. Keep you on your toes. But I do have some questions or some comment on data. I was going to raise a couple of them when we come to the hate crime report. I do think it worrying that both in terms of hate and young people who are victims of crime, these figures aren't available for us still. That just isn't good enough. And so, it makes it harder for us to comment realistically on later reports or to drill down. I think one of the things I wanted to talk specifically about was 101 with changing measures. You are trying to hold the police to account through scrutiny, and we all know that stats can be made to say all sorts of things. I wanted your reassurance on what you're doing to make sure that new measures aren't being used to hide poor performance, because that's a way to make everything look better whilst not actually addressing the issue. And I was wondering whether actually another indicator going in might be abandonment rates, because that would give you an opportunity to unpack what that was in the rationale, and we could watch trends on abandonment rates, and then be able to, you could give us information about whether there was modal shift and other bits in the narrative that goes behind, which might help all of us. So that was me asking you a question about how you do your scrutiny elsewhere realistically.
So a couple of things to help answer that question. So just in terms of the 999 call answering times, these are tracked by the Home Office.
Sorry, I didn't mention 999 calls.
No, but I'm going to tell you what's publicly available on 999 and what isn't available on 101. So 999 are actually measured through BT, through the way in which the call comes in, and when it lands with a force, there's no fudging that answer. You can't, and actually it's interesting that there were some that were taking 7 seconds longer to go from BT to the local force, and it was showing different performance in force to what BT were telling is actually the length of time the customer is waiting. I don't have that type exactly the same way in which I can do it for 101. So all I can do at this stage is, in terms of the stats for 101, is it's why we've introduced triage, so at least people aren't distressed on the phone for too long, because a human will speak to them and they will get pointed in the right direction. So the answering of the phone and helping reassure people they've actually got through to the police has been a massive improvement in terms of that. Now, eventually answering what they've come to speak to the force about has been a challenge in that time frame. As you know, you can be on the phone from 10 minutes to 20 minutes to 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the time of day you might call. And I think in terms of how we better scrutinise that element that they're not fudging performance, the report I brought before you, I'm going to say maybe a year ago, where I showed you what the performance looked like before the introduction of the integrated voice recognition, where you say press 1 for this, press 2 for that. And the performance was way better before they introduced the integrated voice recognition, and you could see how massively the performance dipped after that. Now, I was told on multiple occasions that it was not possible to compare those two data sets because it's like comparing apples and pears. It's two different things. Well, it wasn't. So I think part of the thing is that we push back at the force about, no, we want to understand the longitudinal performance issues, and don't tell me if it's comparing apples and pears, explain to me why that is, because you've only got somebody who's responsible for this area of the business for a maximum of about 2 years before they move into another role. So you haven't got stability of somebody who's accountable for that performance. So I think the oversight from my office has really unpicked some of that, trying to find that performance where it is comparable and where it means something. So I'd say the actually scrutiny of my office has really exposed that, and that was a huge piece of importance, because they just kept they'll tell me this with niche. Oh no, you can't compare niche with what we had with Unify and why it takes longer to do this and why it's all that. Well, of course you can. You're inputting a crime and then you're eventually closing a crime when you've finished with it. What's the process and how? So we are quite good at that scrutiny. However, the 101 call times, no matter how much we've scrutinised it, haven't got better dramatically in a shortish period of time. So we are still really struggling with that, and no amount of looking at the performance is going to change it at this stage. The introduction of AACC7 and the callback function that's available, the reopening of police inquiry offices so that people can go to a local police station and be heard, and I've still got more to open. I think this is all how you make policing more accessible, because fundamentally, the access to policing is the issue here, and access in a timely manner. And I'm doing my utmost to invest in those things that help people in the round get through to policing on crime matters.
You haven't answered my question. On page 29 of your report, you say you are changing the measure from one thing to another that can't be compared. So you're telling us exactly what you're saying you weren't happy with when the police did that to you. So expect some kickback on that, because actually you can't say it wasn't good enough for them, yet it's good enough for us, because it isn't. But also you say, having changed the measures, that you're still reviewing what the measures should be, and so you've changed the measures and they're going to change again, so we will have another leap to another set of things that don't have baselines and comparators. I don't think that's good enough for 101, considering 101 has been, as Councillor Carode will confer, because I think it's only the two of us who were here on day one, that was a conversation on day one, and it's been a conversation, I think, at every panel since. We need to have comparators, and to change indicators without comparators, or to even say what P1 and P2 are compared to switchboard wait times and wait times. What's the difference? There's no explanation. Actually makes this look like you're trying, there is someone, I'm not saying it's you, but there is someone trying to fudge our ability to hold you and through you, the police force, to account for the way that 101 is used. And there might be modal shifts, and I'm perfectly happy to see modal shifts, but we can only see that if there's explanation. And at the moment, this seems to be, we're changing everything, and you can't see any comparators, and actually the explanations are all really vague, and I'm going to change the measures again. That isn't satisfactory on 101, and by November, I think it would be really helpful if we had some definitive stuff on what's being measured, why, and how you will measure the bits, and where we can see whether performance is really improving or not, or whether we will just be carrying on saying to people, oh, the police are hopeless at 101, go and report it in other ways. And by the way, the police are actually paying for Crime Stoppers to take calls because they know 101's so bad. Because that's now out there on the public domain because you said it and we're being webcast. That is pretty damning indictment, We need better on 101 reporting, and we need to be able to do comparators, because otherwise it's not fair to us. We can't hold you to account, and then you can't hold the police to account in all of our name as well as yours.
Chairman, if I may, I've got a technical answer to some of those issues around the 101 measures, if that's helpful.
Before we do that, though, Councillor, I think it would be helpful. But obviously, the panel will be liaising with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner before the November meeting. But just so you can get it on the record now, any data sets that you feel would be helpful?
I think it's really difficult because we know this is a problem. So we're not told why P1 and P2, the previous priority and non-priority calls, are now not being the data that's going to be collected. We've not been explained what wait times and switchboard wait times are, and why those are preferable to priority and non-priority. We've not been told why neither of those are really good enough and another set's being considered, nor what that set is. And we don't have access to all the prime data that the Commissioner has. So it's a bit of, I don't know what question to ask, because I actually don't know what data is sitting there. What I've got is, I understood the last one. I actually don't understand the current one, and I've got no idea what the next one's going to be. And for all we know, the next one might be on the next performance report, which begins another straight off. So it just feels like it's difficult for us to ask the questions. I do think that abandoned calls would be a really useful determinant of success or not. And now that might mean that you need to tell us how many more people are using online, how many more people are using the front desk, how many more people are actually emailing neighbourhood teams direct without doing any of that. So you might need to unpack some of the other routes that people are going into for us to understand. But if all those numbers don't add up to the abandoned calls, then we have an issue, because that means people aren't communicating. We can't tell that at the moment. It just feels that 101 is something that has been a political headache and an operational headache for the politicians since day one. And I'm not saying who that fault lies with. I'm not saying that the Commissioner can suddenly go in, or her predecessor could suddenly go in and magic the system. But we've had 11 years now of discussion of 101 and 11 years of improvements not happening. And if the measures change, then it's very difficult for us to know actually what we are comparing like with, or if we're not. But it just that this doesn't seem satisfactory enough.
And the data sets as well within themselves are helpful, but also what triggers the definition of an abandonment as well would be...
And similarly, if we are going to have switchboard wait times and wait times, what those both mean in real terms, because I don't think I could explain that to anyone at all on the basis of this paper. I could sort of explain the P1 and P2s, because they sort of made a bit more sense, but this one, not so. If there's a new set, what are those new sets going to be? We're not given any indication, and to change from one to another in rapid succession seems a bit unusual. It just left me feeling a bit, I don't know the questions to ask. And this is something that I know Roger and I might both be yelling out the boxes as they carry us away in years to come. I hope not, but you know, it would be good to get this solved, and it would be good for us to be able to know how to ask pertinent questions from the performance report.
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, Commissioner, you and your team have heard the debate, and just give you an opportunity to feed back on that, and then I think we'll take a short comfort break. So, Commissioner.
Thank you, Councillor Penberthy. Felicity from my office, who's the Deputy Chief Exec, has been very much all over this, so she's just going to give a bit of a technical answer just to assist for going forward.
Thank you. And Councillor Penberthy, I'm always grateful when you ask me techie questions and get one step ahead of us. So as I go into this, what I will say is we are intending to bring a full report with more information around many of the measures that you've talked about there, so that the panel can have full sight of all of this. I'll start by trying to explain the difference between the P1 and P2, why we've stopped counting that, and and what we're counting now, and then we'll go on to what we're looking to bring next. In very basic terms, for those who are perhaps haven't looked at this before, P1 and P2 were priority 1 and priority 2 lines. You would come through on a voice recognition system and say, and select what you were wanting to report, and that would funnel you into a particular queue as to what was more urgent and what was less urgent for P1 and P2. We've changed that system so that now everybody speaks to a human being, and that's the switchboard triage. They will pull out anybody who is an urgent priority or indeed a 999 call and direct that over to somebody, and they'll be a bit quicker. Or they will say, you'll be on the line a bit longer. Since that was introduced in November, and in July a callback was also offered, which is if you don't want to now stay on the line and wait, someone will call you back. The reason we can't now measure that is we've got that intervention point of the switchboard, so we want to count how long does it take for you to speak to a human being, and then how long does it take for, on average, for all those people to then have the resolution of that call to the end. And because it's a different system, we can't compare it to P1 and P2. I say can't compare it because we do want to now have a look as that information builds with time at what that looks like if you were to do comparative proxies, as it were. If I total the amount of time people are waiting, does that look like the total amount of time that people are waiting under P1 and P2? That is the type of analysis that we intend to bring you to the next panel. We were not able to do that with this because of the timeframes in which these were introduced, with the new callbacks being introduced in only July, and us only having a few weeks of data since then, and being able to bring that information to you now. So we've brought you as what we can to be transparent, but we are now gathering all the information to do that analysis, and I hope that will be able to give you that comparison of what we might call apples and pears, but actually gives a user experience before and after and ongoing.
I think that would be helpful, Chair, and I think if we're then able to make comment on where you're at and what we feel before they become firmly faced as these are the indicators, that would be really helpful, because no matter what an election result might be, no matter what a new plan will be, I can assure you that post-May 101 will still be on our agendas.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think we can see a way forward now with this item. So, yes, certainly.
In support of what Councillor Pemberley was asking, in that, are we saying then that where in 3.4 of the report it says this will be brought to a future panel meeting, are we now saying this will be brought to the next panel meeting?
The specific items I believe we've identified will be at the next meeting, but that is a more general statement, isn't it? Yeah. You happy with that, Councillor Thomas? Yeah. Yep. Okay. So I will propose we note the report from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. That said, taken on board all the points made and the request for extra data. So it's been proposed, seconded, all in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you. I propose a 10-minute comfort break now, and everybody reassemble at 12:30. Thank you. On to item 7. I'm conscious that if we could have some order. Thank you. I'm conscious that we are losing 1 or 2 members now, so we're getting quite dangerously close to being in quorum. So I think we're going to have to crack on and possibly take the. I think it will be preferential if we take the next 2 items as read. I will give the Commissioner's team an opportunity to just highlight anything you haven't covered or you feel needs quite strong emphasis, but if we could just take the body of it as read, we can then crack on with questions.
Sorry, Chair, can you just confirm when you said the next 2 items, are you referring to item 7, the profile, and item 8, the ASB profile, so the 2 profiles?
That's correct. Thank you.
I think we've talked quite a bit about drugs and ASB this morning. I don't need to add anything extra at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, we'll crack on with questions. So any questions for item 7? No? Okay.
Sorry,
Councillor
Mr. Chair.
Toms.
I keep on getting logged out of this thing. It's not particularly good.
I can give you a copy if you'd
No,
like.
no, that's all right. On one of the pages, it's got about the drug deaths, and Plymouth and Torbay don't fare too well there. Cornwall's just above the average line, if you like, but Devon's right on the average line. But these figures are compiled and they're up to the Peninsula. It says Peninsula in 2021, the rates are very high, etc. Is the reason that it's only back to 21 the same as for extracting the information out, or can that be updated?
Thank you, Chairman. We get this information through health service, not through police measures. So it may well be related to what information they hold at the moment and what they are able to give us. Again, I can go and check when the next round of data is due. I can give you something that's an alarming information on the back of this, is that there is more drug deaths for those who are in treatment than there has ever been before. And that means that people who are older users of drugs are losing their lives through complications. But the fact that there are more people dying in treatment than ever before is the worrying statistic. And I know that is a fact as of now. So I'll just give you an up-to-date information about drug deaths. But I can check exactly where this has been sourced.
Just to come back on that, and the reason I asked that is because recently I was watching a programme and it was on about the drug deaths in Scotland, which are probably the worst in Europe, and you know, that it just amazes me how people can throw their lives away in such a manner. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Toms. Councillor Pengelly. Pembervey.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry I missed the start of this. The Daily Express are interested in a little piece of joint work the police and us are doing on some antisocial behaviour related stuff. And the police supported us yesterday on something and they want to cover it, so I had to go and sort out some press lines. I just want to talk about hate crime, if I may, and I understand we're dealing with both drugs and hate crime together at the moment. No?
No, that's in a couple of items.
That's okay. I was just, sorry, that's what I was told.
That's
so,
okay.
That's fine. I'll come back on hate crime later.
I'll make sure you're the top of the list, Councillor. Okay, so I'll propose from the Chair that we note that report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Toms. All in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. 1 or 2 hands. Any against? Any abstentions? No, that was unanimous. Okay, moving on to item 8. Any questions for the Commissioner for item 8? No? Okay. I will propose from the Chair that we note that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lever. All in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Again. Commissioners' update report. Are we again happy that we take that as read? It's been circulated to everybody. Any questions? Okay, no questions. Councillor Hackett.
Yeah. The Home Secretary made a statement that where there is a report of crime, police would always respond. Would the Police and Crime Commissioner wish to comment on that?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's been a letter from the Home Secretary to Police and Crime Commissioners and Chief Constables around the pursuing lines of inquiry for every crime. As panel members may know, in order to manage how the police choose what they investigate, they identify, is there obvious CCTV evidence? Have they a known suspect? Or does anybody know the suspect? Is there witnesses? And all that sort of information that they decide whether it's worthy of following up. And the Home Secretary is really clear that wherever there may be an opportunity to seize any of those extra bits of evidence, the police should be going out and dealing with that. I haven't seen a full plan from the Acting Chief Constable at the moment about how he plans to do that. Now, I know that the National Police Chiefs Council have agreed, like they did, that they would go and visit every burglary victim. They decided to do that without a steer from commissioners. So I think they're all having to come back and respond. Now, I've been told that Greater Manchester Police managed to do this. So it's doable, and that's something that I'll expect to see as a plan from the Acting Chief Constable about how they will do that. They're doing a lot of corporate planning at the moment, the force are. They're really clear what they're focused on, and they're moving resources around at the moment. So I will be able, and again, that would be another one to bring back perhaps in my Commissioner's update at the next meeting about how the force plan to do that, or what is different to what they're doing now.
So let me be clear. Where there is, say, a report of a theft of a quad bike, the police will investigate it rather than just be giving a crime number.
So, Councillor Hackett, what they will do is they will identify if there is a witness to anybody stealing the quad bike, whether there is any CCTV, very unlikely in a rural area, whether there is any information that might lead to where it's going. If they have nothing other than it has just been stolen, I cannot guarantee that they would definitely investigate it. But there is, again, as the South West Police and Crime Commissioners, the 5 of us have just, in the last month, prioritised rural crime, particularly serious and organised rural crime, because it's cross borders, and about an operation to take place in relation to that as a region, because we know a lot of that theft is serious and organised crime. It's not a local neighbour stealing somebody's quad bike. It is serious and organised crime.
Okay, I was just concerned about capacity, but you are saying the capacity
They need
exists.
to have a line of inquiry to follow. So if there's no CCTV, no witness, no knowledge of who the offender is, no knowledge of where it's gone or anything like that, then I can't see them being able to do a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hewins.
Thank you. Councillor Hackett has just slightly led onto my point that I welcome that rural crime is to be the next regional priority. As you've rightly just said, a lot of it is organised crime. You don't tend to nick your neighbour's quad bike. The other things that are being stolen are fuel. You know, people's oil, diesel, etc. are all being stolen, and that is on rural houses, where some of the tanks are onto the roads. So, yes, as you say, some of it may not have anything, but we still need people to report it, even if they've only get a crime number, because once you've got it logged, you may then work out there's a pattern going along that road or that area of rurality. So that is a bit, and will there be a paper on this of what you're intending to do and how you're intending the officers to do the work for us all?
Thank you, Chair. And just to highlight, it is National Rural Crime Week next week as well, just in case any councillors want to go out and about and have some visibility. You'll see some police officers at livestock markets in Tavistock and in Exeter, and you'll see a range of things. And again, you might want to help promote that next week. In terms of the rural, I can do an update through my Commissioner's report anyway on where we've got to on that. As a region, we've agreed Philip Wilkinson, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Wiltshire, will be the lead, with Rod Hanson, who is the Chief Constable of Gloucestershire. And we've already had a proposal put before us as a 5 of how to fund the intelligence function that links to that. Because one of the things we know is forces don't talk to each other well enough around rural crime. And we want to solve that. So I can bring those updates through on my Commissioner's update report.
Thank you. And if I could also remind members to make sure that their microphones are directly in front of them. It's important for the live stream as well. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report, Alison. And indeed, I go back to Councillor Hackett's question, which is really, I guess it goes back to the question of capacity. Now, I spent Monday with our local police force. Fascinating. What an extremely good day that was. I talked to all sorts of different people, and the thing that really stands out for me is that whatever the priority, the size of the pie does not change. And that, for example, where we are up in North Devon, one of the issues that we have is that if there are no healthcare professionals available, that then two police officers have to accompany a person down to Exeter Hospital to go and have the various different bits and pieces done, which I don't want to know the detail of, to be perfectly honest. And that's 2 officers out of 8 on duty. So that's a quarter of our available police officers who are engaged with one person sitting in a hospital. Quite a big impact on their ability to actually deal with crime in the locality. I talked to the CID people. Yeah, quite difficult to recruit. I think there was 1, maybe 2 of them. It is really difficult to think how our police forces are going to respond to the push from the Home Secretary to investigate. And I appreciate what you say about having suspects and so on and so on and so on and so forth. But we do keep coming back to this issue about capacity. We do keep coming back to the issues about trying to take on trainees, but that actually there isn't any available housing. So, you know, people coming and trying to take jobs up and then not being able to take them up because there's no housing. We keep coming back to, you know, the number of incidents that the police are responding to that takes their capacity away from actually doing the investigative side of things. And so I suppose my question is, in the report, in what you put forward, whether there will be recommendations that perhaps we'd quite like a bit more cash, actually, for our police forces in the Southwest. Because I think that the question of the additional costs of providing policing in rural areas, you know, it's not just policing, it's all services. We know it costs more. You know, that is a real issue. I'd be interested to know if that's something that can go into the report back up to Westminster. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start with the funding and then I'll go into the overreach that me and my office do, which has nothing to do with policing, in order to solve some of those problems that you talked about. So, sorry, I'll start with the funding issue and then I'll talk about the overreach that me and my office do in things that are nothing to do with policing to help solve some of those problems that you talked about. So firstly, obviously the government has been talking about a funding formula and revising it for a number of years. As you know, we put a very good submission in from Devon and Cornwall with the help of partners around rurality and sparsity and seasonality. We put all of those 3 things in, and the policing minister did say publicly in Parliament that they are looking to see how they can bring in tourism as some sort of measure within the funding formula. So at this point in time, we still haven't had the consultation on that funding formula. So It's not anywhere near ready yet, but I'm expecting it and was expecting it before summer recess happened. So it should be coming in the next few months, some form of consultation on that funding formula. And we obviously want to be recognised for being the #1 domestic tourist destination, one of the largest police force geographies in the whole of England. We've got a number of things, and the rurality and sparsity challenge that we've got, where we've got big open spaces and very few people, we want to get that recognised in the funding formula. So we've been on the case in relation to getting our case put forward for Devon and Cornwall for that, but I await the government's consultation as the next stage. Now, in terms of healthcare in North Devon, unfortunately, I can't afford to build a hospital or be responsible for such a thing, and that's never going to change in terms of how those police officers do have to travel those distances for some of that specific healthcare.
Sorry, it's actually not about the hospital. It's about the contracts with the and the availability of the healthcare professionals at the hospital in North Devon.
Yeah, and so the contract that policing procure to support those who are in our custody suites, and we still have custody in North Devon, we're temporary at the moment, so while it's there, in the sense of the fact that they cannot recruit those healthcare professionals in some geographies, and that is actually detrimental to the healthcare of that detainee, some of which are very, very vulnerable and unwell when they are in the care of policing, and they are nervous to have those people in there because these people die in custody. So there is a review of custody going on at the moment about where that healthcare provision is failing, because I'm really concerned about detainee safety. I haven't had a proposal about what the plan is for that, but it may well include custody closures as part of that, because it's not the responsibility of policing to find healthcare which isn't available. And that's our challenge. So we're stuck at the moment a little bit between a rock and a hard place. And I think North Devon suffers dramatically because of this isolation and your lack of key worker housing. So in terms of the housing challenge that you've got, because I feel it in terms of police officers struggling, firefighters struggling, NHS staff struggling to find the housing that is appropriate for them in North Devon, with you having so many second homes, Airbnbs, not lots of building going on in particular. So we've got a real challenge. That's why I started the Prisoners Building Homes project, because we have this crisis across the country. So our Prisoners Building Home projects will build eco-pods and housing for people, and we are in a conversation with North Devon Council about key worker housing. It's an ongoing discussion that we've been having about where we could maybe build these eco-homes to actually help with some of the key workers. When I visited Ilfracombe Police Station, because we're reopening the front desk, and I could see the old key worker housing for the police officers that were around the actual police station, now home to some lovely families. But, that's all been lost over the years in terms of particularly isolated communities that need that support with the housing. So I am on the housing agenda conversation. That is something that we're doing from my office. In terms of the CID challenge and the recruitment, there's a few issues as well as, let alone the housing issues, is you lose your shift allowance on CID. You earn less than you would if you were a response officer on CID, and that's part of the challenge. So there has been policies to pay people a bit of an uplift if they want to go into being a detective, to encourage people to come, but it hasn't really landed and it hasn't really worked. And I think that's why they started introducing the police staff investigators. We've had 2 cohorts, I think, of those, which are ordinary members of the public who are not police officers going in and becoming police staff investigators. So we've got a cohort, I think we recruited around 20 of those in order to enable other people to come in and help with that investigative cause, but they don't get to the same level of training as an actual police detective would. So they've tried some new ideas to help with that detective side, and it's still a national problem of being able to recruit enough into the detective world. It doesn't seem to be a career of choice for many these days.
Councillor Worth. Thank you. I'm particularly interested in the point of the report on the LEPH activity. I'm very much involved in Cornwall in our digital inclusion, mobile technology and all that sort of thing. So very positive to see officers being helped. But what I find interesting, and we've tried to, I think in some cases, to get our councils and our police officers to work alongside each other. And I've just tried to go in and download the app and access it and see and have an understanding. I can't, all right, but there is a website here that says I can. Now, in front of me here, I've got an application, NHS Quicker, which is telling me right now, updated in the last 2 or 3 minutes, the emergency department at Derriford has got 78 people in it. The waiting are 18. The waiting hours are 2 hours waiting. Tavistock is 2 hours with 9 people waiting. Liskeard is nobody waiting, actually. So there's no wait in Liskeard. What I'm trying to think on here is there an opportunity with this LEPH application to be shared and linked with our council staff who are potentially out supporting in these crises? I'm not talking about councillors, but I just like being able to get at it. Is there somewhere we can, and I notice you mentioned a lady called Heather Coombe, who is your, because it's here I'm reading it. So is there somewhere we could possibly put our council staff and Heather together in a way of getting the application, which clearly has happened for NHS Quicker, which is public access, where the things that I can sort of see in your report that look pretty good to me, with the picture that's showing me alcohol and drugs and national health and suicide prevention and stuff on that thing on the front that we can link together.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we're quite proud of the introduction of the Left Link. It's law enforcement in public health, and it's been created under the Serious Violence Programme. And one of the biggest challenges we've had is police officers spend a lot of their time directing individuals in the community to other help. And what they've always had a limited access to that information. We used to have something called Ask Ned that the force used to use, and it was keeping it updated was the problem. And the other issue was it wasn't really clear what the next step was, other than here's a telephone number, or have you heard of this agency? It actually gives police officers the opportunity to ask the right questions. I don't know if it shows it in there, but there's almost like an ask, action, next steps that they can choose under each of those, and it is around mental health, it is around drugs, it is around alcohol, and it is around other things, that other services that people can help them with. It's publicly available now on that website. I'm sorry, probably I don't know if it's the Wi-Fi here, but we piloted it in Plymouth, and we've only just, I believe, managed to expand it to the force as a whole. So it's had quite a good take-up in Plymouth from police officers, because they've been getting the feedback about what works and what doesn't. We're trying to take that regionally to all of the 5 forces across the southwest, but there is nothing stopping us or you actually accessing that. So I just wonder if offline we just check that the access is right. Anyone could use it, and that's why it's quite a beauty that it's really helpful signposting tool, and it gives you the next step, not just here's a telephone number to ring.
I appreciate the links might not be right, but I think as an action afterwards, could we have an appropriate public access link from our own devices or whatever? And if that won't work through a council device, I can, certainly from a Cornwall perspective, see that we can get that link to work. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Worth. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Turning to item 8, customer contact, with specific reference to the topic of firearms, I see the paragraph where, Commissioner, you say the team strives to resolve queries and concerns at the first point of contact. Can I just ask, when you're receiving queries or concerns about the delay experienced in applying for a licence, how are your team dealing with those? Because it seems to me that the one obvious response from our point of view, particularly in the light of the long conversations we had from Keam last time, is that actually if there are prudent and sensible delays in the process for the right reasons, then that's entirely appropriate. I don't know whether that is a slant that you're taking, or whether actually it's an issue of capacity, which then comes back to Councillor Penberthy's comments about whether or not the whole process is cost effective in terms of staff requirement.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the thing is, in particular, in relation to the firearms licensing, is we're really concerned about businesses or people who need to use them for business purposes as opposed to leisure. So I have been encouraging both the BASC, as in the British Association and Shooting Conservation, and the Gamekeepers Association to contact me and to encourage their members to, if it affects their business and they've been delayed for a long period of time. Now, I can't say I can prioritise them, but I can highlight the problem to the department, and the department may well be able to assist them because they didn't realise they were a business. So we've got bits where I can help a customer if they've had a big delay, and I might be able to highlight those customers that are waiting to the department. They usually can liaise direct with the department, but I think if it's been going on for a year, I'm starting to say, come on, can we help this individual? It affects their business. And they will prioritise business customers, just for your awareness. In terms of anything else in relation to delays, one of the reasons why I'm doing this in particular is there is a backlog linked to ones, and then people who are coming in new are getting dealt with slightly differently to the backlog, and it's those that might be stuck in that backlog that I'm feeling personally able to assist with. So I am saying to people, come to me, my office will see what they can do to assist you, particularly if you're a business. And that's a good way for me to get visibility of the problem and the impact of the problem. It's why I do tell people to come to my office, and my office will often say, well, we can't deal with that. And I said, but I want to know about that in order to ask the right questions of the force. So it's, again, another way of me getting some visibility around it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hackett.
Thank you, Chair. I want to touch on something that Councillor Lever has brought up, and I think we're working in tandem. She mentioned that 2 officers out of the possible 8, and in the past I've always not gone into the operational numbers because the thin blue line is very thin in our area of Torridge and North Devon. But many years ago, I raised the issue of APOS, a place of safety. And I remember this great announcement of all these new hospitals that were going to be built. And when the release was made, I said, is there any chance that we would have an APOS, a place of safety, built within the confines of the hospital in North Devon? Well, we didn't get our hospital, our new hospital. And as far as I'm aware, we haven't got our place of safety in North Devon. And not only are people going to Exeter, I understand they're going into Torbay. So you've got 2 officers off shift for the entire shift, taking what are invariably frequent flyers, as they're called in the service, from an area of North Devon Torridge right the way down to Torbay. The officers are coming back in a few days' time. That same person is being transported again away from our area. Surely there is the possibility that we can get a place of safety in North Devon so these officers can drop somebody off locally and they can be safe and secure and out of harm's way rather than having to go that dramatic distance. You know, I've been talking about this for over 5 years, so surely something can be done. Any comments?
Thank you, Chairman. I do feel for Northern Devon as a whole. I do think you've been let down by the level of services that you get, particularly from the health side. You've got housing challenges you can't seem to solve, and all of this adds to how your public services are not able to actually deliver for you in the way that you want. We have had this conversation many times before about that travel. The only ray of hope that may be on the horizon is the national scheme, Right Care, Right Person, that the government have introduced after a success in Humberside. And what that is making sure that the police aren't dealing with people who they don't need to be dealing with if it needs to be another agency, such as a mental health professional or in some other means. So we have been a bit slow on the uptake for Right Care, Right Person. Our providers, I don't think, are in a good place to be able to deliver it, which is why we have to sort of work at the pace of our partners because we're trying to work in partnership. And it might be something worth lobbying the Integrated Care Board in relation to Councillor Hackett in terms of a place of safety for North Devon and doing it under the Right Care, Right Person. That might be one of the solutions to make sure they get the right care the right person for the right care. So I think there's an opportunity through that project. There is a project steering group established within the force to work with partners on this, but that might be a route in which to do it. I do know that integrated care boards were slightly taken aback when the government announced that this would be happening and that the police would stop attending those incidences. And I know the Met Commissioner put a deadline on when they would stop attending certain incidences in order to push those health providers to deliver what they should be delivering. We're not at that point here in Devon and Cornwall, but we may get to that. I don't know at this stage. But I think lobbying through the ICB as part of the Right Care, Right Person national scheme between policing and our health services, they've nationally signed an agreement on this. It's about making it happen locally. So there may be an opportunity through there, Councillor Hackett.
I hear what you say, Commissioner, if I could come back. But, you know, what a surprise it would be if a local councillor was speaking up for his local community. I think if the Devon and Cornwall Police and Crime Commissioner spoke up for Torridge and North Devon about this, it would have far greater weight and effect and impact. Because I've been doing it for the last 5 years. Okay, I haven't come across the Right Care Board before, but something has to be done urgently, because if you could give me the number of police hours that have been lost in, say, the last 5 years, I can then make up an even greater case. But I'm without those statistics. Could you supply them to me, please? And could you lobby on our behalf as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hackett. What I'll do is I will take the concept of this conversation about place of safety and North Devon healthcare generally back to it was Assistant Chief Constable Glenn Mayhew who was leading on this. So I will take that back for him in relation to it. And if I do have the access to any of those statistics, Councillor Hackett, I will supply them to you, because councillors are heavily involved in health and wellbeing boards, in other areas where you will meet the chairs of these particular boards and be able to influence them. And I'd appreciate that we do it from all angles.
Agreed.
Thank you, Commissioner, and we'll leave you to liaise on that. I was conscious of one more hand, was I? Yes, Councillor.
I was just going to ask a question, excuse me, going back to gun licences, etc. How is the separation from Devon and Dorset going, and are they now able to recruit staff, because they were a bit slower in that process, so we're still working with them? When is that separation likely to take place, and is it still on schedule?
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't had a most recent report. So the last meeting we had around this particular subject was to decouple with Dorset, and I haven't had the next report now which says this is where we're at. So I'm just waiting for that one to come in. I'll be able to update you at the next Police and Crime panel. I'll make sure that, again, that's in my Commissioner's update report so that you've got an understanding of it. As far as I'm aware, we're on track. As far as I'm aware, we are uplifting Dorset in order to enable to make this happen, because we have a lot of the staff on our side and they don't, so we have to do a bit of a mix. But as far as I'm aware, it's on track, but I haven't had a formal report on that.
Thank you. Councillor Toms and then Councillor Wright.
I was going to ask a similar question to you, Councillor Lever, but I'm going to put it in some context. Some years ago, in about 2011, this country made the decision and they took 20,000 officers out of the system. If you think that each one of those would have had 25 years minimum experience, that's 500,000 years of experience that were lost at that time. You've replaced them now with 20,000 new recruits, which is fantastic news, and we've had over 600 in this force area. But they've only got at the maximum 60,000 years of experience. And until they probably got 4 or 5 years experience, they won't be as efficient as the ones that left. So, you know, I think it will improve, but it's, you know, that's just a pure fact. Across the country, there are something like 4.4 million more people now than there were in 2011. You know, that's the population growth. That's, you know, from statistics, right? Which is half the size of London. London has 34,000 police officers, so we've had no real increase in numbers to match the population growth. Here in Devon and Cornwall, you might have heard me say at the last meeting, we've had in excess of 100,000 new people come into this force area, and that's nearly the equivalent to the population of Exeter, because Exeter is about 130,000. So I think things will improve as those officers get further on in their careers, because as a newbie, we all know that you're less efficient, you're less able, and all the rest of it. But through experience, you will get better, and I can see things improving. When the Commissioner talked about the ICB and for Councillor Hackett, I'm on the Health Committee at Cornwall Council, and I know the ICB have all these other people that come to their meetings, and it's all an input on how the health system and everything else works. But don't forget, they're under the same pressure because, 100,000 more people in the two areas, it's going to be a community hospital at the minimum in some areas that are going to have that impact. But and I know I shouldn't have said that, but that's just how I feel, and I hope that's useful for the Commissioner and all the rest of you. My thing is, some years ago there was a survey done, or a piece of work, and they took officers from places like South East Cornwall and they moved them into Plymouth and other places because there were more crimes and all the rest of it. But that has left us now with a problem that in places like South East Cornwall, and I've already admitted that in Lou there's been a problem with shoplifting, and we're dealing with it because we've got to. We've also had a lot of what I forget which councillor said it about rural crime. We have been targeted by professional criminals or criminal gangs that have come into our area and then stealing high value farm machinery, sat navs, all the other stuff that are of values of tens of thousands of pounds. There is a report, and this is only a report from our local radio station, that 3 bikes were stolen in one raid, and the guy actually got them back from Poland. So, it's international. And what I'm trying to say is, I, like Councillor Lever and Councillor Hackett, would like to see a little bit of review and maybe some more officers going back out into the rural areas, because my population feel slightly neglected. I hope that was not a rambling question, but that's what
Thank you, Chairman. I'll go big first, just in terms of, I'm now the National Lead for Serious and Organised Crime on behalf of Police and Crime Commissioners in England and Wales. And one of the things I've noticed, so there's a National Serious and Organised Crime Strategy that may well be published in the next few weeks. I've yet to see a draft of it, but I'm concerned that it may not have acquisitive crime in there. Serious and organised acquisitive crime, which particularly affects our rural communities and particularly affects things like shoplifting. People never talked about serious and organised crime in relation to shoplifting, but we all knew they were going down that pub to sell it there, and then it was being, stolen by shopping list. So I think there's a challenge of, I've got a job to try and push and make sure nationally that they are respecting and recognising acquisitive crime for serious and organised criminals, and that will help identify and show the focus in broader communities than they possibly do now. In terms of your neighbourhood policing teams, and you're saying that they were pulled away in austerity to police the higher crime areas and they've never come back. So there has been an uplift overall, and every local policing area, my goodness, it would have been in the 2018 budget where we added 27 neighbourhood police officers, 1 for every sector. Now what we haven't been able to do is say, well, is that neighbourhood beat manager still there? or have they been seconded, or have they moved somewhere else and have they backfilled? So we've got, I think, one of the laser focuses, and again, panel might want to assist on this, we need to have a laser focus on neighbourhood policing, because at the moment, the force will talk about community policing and patrol response, detectives, but actually, unless we laser focused on neighbourhood policing, on the numbers that are going in there, and if there are particular communities where they need to be protected, and I've had this conversation previously with the Chief Constable, where we have persistent antisocial behaviour in our streets, and particularly in our high streets, you should not allow those officers, when one's off sick, one's on a secondment, and they're not backfilled. There needs to be protected areas in particular for neighbourhood policing. So it's something that my office and I need to really explore over the next few months. I think part of the Home Secretary's letter, investigate every crime, with increased visibility, but I need to have a laser focus on neighbourhood policing, and I will. I want to be able to show you that that investment is actually happening and has happened. So I think keeping it here as a conversation would be really, really helpful.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask that maybe not in the November meeting, but the following meeting, perhaps we could have a proper conversation about that, because, you know, it's been raised by 3 councillors here, so I think that means that, you know, it's something of concern to the committee.
Yes, do you want to bring that up under item 12, Councillor Toms, and we can have a discussion?
I can't hear what you're saying.
Sorry, we've noted it, so we'll also have a discussion on item 12 on the work programme as well, but I think it's been noted. Okay, I'm still conscious we've got the hate crime item to come, so I'm going to have to close the list, but we have one more from Councillor Wright.
It's okay. I did put my hand up quite earlier and you nodded, but I think you must have been nodding at Councillor Hackett, which is why you thought I was trying to sneak in. I think my question can wait until the next panel. Actually, it's fairly generic, so I'll withdraw from that now. Thank you.
Okay, that's much appreciated. Thank you, Councillor. And apologies if I missed you. Okay, I'll propose from the chair that the panel note that report. So I'll propose from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lever. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 10, hate crime. So I will again hand over to the Commissioner to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report was originally encouraged by this panel to be created. Councillor Atia Allah, who's no longer a panel member, through the Police and Crime Plan, helped encourage me to put hate crime as a priority in the Police and Crime Plan as a measure, so that we had visibility of it. And I think that was really, I'm trying to give you examples of how the panel can influence me in the production of both the plan and my work. And so I'm pleased to bring you this bit of research that we've done in terms of doing a desktop exercise on what the data's telling us. We've done focus groups with victims of hate crime to tell us what their experiences were like. And we've spoken to police officers and the teams particularly who help support our victims of hate crime around what's happening. I think the one thing that was heartening in relation to this report is that the police are quite good at dealing with victims of hate crime. I think there's something like a 73% satisfaction rate. I think that's higher than if you were to do that on all crime with the public. So there's obviously room for improvement, but I'm really pleased to see that they are acting on it, they are supporting victims, and they are doing what they should be doing in relation to that. The other bit, just to add to you, it gives you some data in here so that you can get a feel of what it's like at the moment. You can see that race and sexual orientation is the highest in relation to hate crime that's happening in our communities. You can see that stalking and harassment is the highest element of that. It's not. My biggest question was, are you more likely to be attacked in the street because of who you are? I want to know if there's violence and issues going on. So if you look at the data, it actually tells you mainly it is stalking, harassment and violence without injury that's happening to these individuals. So this is abusive behaviour, this is shouting, this is following, this is online issues as well. But I just thought a bit of the transparency around that just to help us understand what's happening in our communities. So no, you're not more likely to have a violent attack on you because of who you are in Devon and Cornwall, which was that was one of my biggest concerns. But we've got work to do. I know Plymouth, you've been scrutinising hate crime in Plymouth, and I know that there's been a real push, I think, to help policing get this right. One of the things we want to do is obviously ensure community cohesion. We want to make sure people are not being able to not live their lives freely. And I think this report just gives you a flavour of how it's happening in Devon and Cornwall Police at the moment, and what some of the opportunities are, again, for us to work together on some of these areas in particular. And I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Thank you. And members, don't be alarmed with me sat here coughing and sputtering down to you. It's nothing catching, it's just an ongoing chest infection, so it's nothing catching. Councillor Penberthy.
Thank you, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to speak and then run. I have a meeting with one of the leaders of one of our diverse communities in the city that was due to start 10 minutes ago. But he knows why I'm here. And David has forgiven me. I just want to make some comments and then ask a question if I can, because I really appreciate this report. You might know on page 84, here are the top 5 areas for hate crimes in the patch. Just to give the panel some context, Plymouth city centre neighbourhood is half of my ward. The Stonehouse neighbourhood is the other half. So of this, 19.6% of hate crime across all of Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly happens in my ward. I would really welcome, Commissioner, an opportunity for us to have a conversation outside of here about the implications of that, because to be able to say that 20% of one crime type happens in one local authority ward probably is fairly unique. Not only in the war, in your patch, but probably anywhere nationally. And so this is something that really matters, not only to me as a ward councillor, to me as someone with a protected characteristic, or to me with the portfolio for community cohesion, equalities and diversity in the city. I think it's really interesting when you look at stalking, harassment and violence without injury as the top 2. If we were talking about this as VORG, we'd be talking about those as really important indicators of a ladder of progression towards violence, if not tact. So I think we do need to be aware that whilst people with protected characteristics are not more likely to receive injury, actually there are some worrying steps just 1 away from that or 2 away from that could lead to that changing. And I think if we don't tackle hate crime, if we don't tackle hate incidents, then they escalate. I haven't reported the fact that the other day, Giles Perrott and I were grabbing a quick conversation after Cabinet, sat on a bench outside, and someone walked by and said, "Oh, look, there's a couple of old faggots having a chat." Now, that's a hate incident, it's not a hate crime. I haven't clogged up your systems by reporting it. I wouldn't describe myself as an old faggot. As a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I find that offensive. I don't know how Giles felt about it as a straight man. But those low-level name callings, if you get away with them, and I know if you can get away with them, I was about to go into a group meeting, we were all busy, and I know your systems are too. But we need to think about those low-level bits, because the incidents are less likely to be reported than the crimes themselves. Your analysis is really interesting. If we were to think about VORG, I'm sure that a lot of women who experience criminal activity experience it because they are women. yet only 6% of hate crime is recorded under sex and gender. So I think that there might need to be some thought put to how things are accurately reported in terms of hate crime as well as other crimes. And age doesn't even feature here, yet young people crimes against young people are growing according to the figures, and we don't have the latest trends on that or on hate crime. So I think there might be substantial underreporting even within reported crime, let alone unreported hate crime. I think that's probably worth future delving into to see if we can get the figures more accurate in terms of total experience. So some reflections on your scrutiny, which I was only able to make because you've done your scrutiny, so thank you for that. The question I wanted to pose, on page 80, section 3.9, you talk about persisting in issues and key barriers to improving how the police respond, but you don't then say what those key barriers are. Or at least it wasn't particularly clear in the report if you were then talking about key barriers, because you then went on to talk about other things. So I just wondered whether you were able to unpack a little what the key barriers the police face in terms of how they're improving the response. It's great to hear there's such positive victim satisfaction. I suppose how many people actually get taken to court, charged, and get positive outcomes for the victim would be the next stage on. But I wondered if you could unpack the barriers bit a bit.
Thank you, Councillor. And sometimes those personal anecdotes and examples sort of set the sort of cold statistical facts aside. So thank you for that. Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just, before I answer your direct question, I'll just go back to the sex and gender reporting being low and you saying about hate crime. If you recall, Devon and Cornwall Police were one of the early adopters of trying to record misogyny in some way. And where it's really clear, like, for example, someone is, I'd say the incel culture or something like that, where it's really clear, that's how they'll get reported in there, rather than all men don't like women and therefore it's hate. So it's been a learning exercise, I think, in terms of how to use that, but they have used that as an aggravating factor when they're reporting on that in relation to even in relation to a rape, for example. If they believe there is a hate crime element to it, that will be an aggravating factor added on as part of the case. So it's actually useful information to support the actual crimes that have occurred as an aggravating factor, anything to do with hate, which will give them a stronger sentence through a court. Just in terms of the barriers that you raised on page 80, believe it or not, the paragraphs after that statement are actually the barriers, and they are the same barriers that every member of this public who wanted to report something to the police would have, which has been quite an interesting thing to explore. So the fact that they can't get through on 101 has been a barrier to people reporting hate crime. The fact that investigations take a long time have been a frustration to those who are receiving end of an investigation of a hate crime. The fact that officers aren't always treating them exactly in the right way is the same as if we get with rape victims, for example, not feeling the empathy. So it's quite interesting that a lot of the issues in relation to our corporate issues that relate to all of the other matters that we deal with as well. So one of the reasons to improve the 101 service is to enable and encourage and build confidence for those who are reporting hate crime. So I think it's been quite an interesting piece of research that we've done that's just identified they feel like they're getting poor customer service sometimes, but actually everybody's getting the same poor customer service. So we've got to drive up those improvements.
Thanks a lot, and I would welcome a ward-level discussion, probably with yourself and appropriate senior police officers beyond just our sector inspector, because clearly to have such a prevalence of one crime in one small patch is, I think, worrying for anyone. Please excuse me, I don't want to keep David waiting any longer than I need to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Yes.
I'd just like to say that it's been noted within some of the hate crime is around housing, and where it's perceived refugees, asylum seekers are getting housing, and those on the housing lists are being left outside. And that is causing quite a lot of tension, aggravation in some communities. And, you know, I think it's something that the police maybe need to be a bit more aware of, that there's tensions around housing. And it is a difficult one to solve.
Just to ask, has there been any sort of effect on the cost of living aspect of sort of increasing those tensions between members of communities?
At the moment, obviously at a very local level, where you may have a hotel or you may have where you're housing asylum seekers or refugees, the police are working very locally with the local councils on that matter, and any tensions are being escalated through those conversations. So I think unless you feel the police are not responding in relation to that, you can let my office know and we can see what's happening. But they're usually really, in fact, they're proactive in accessing and entering those hotels to actually be there to safeguard the individuals that are there. So they've been very proactive from my awareness, and I visited one of the hotels as well to have a look at what the police have been doing with them too. I haven't had anything alerted to me that there's been an increase in community tension. Obviously there's been some protests in Cornwall, and there's been very interesting understanding of both the protesters on, I think there's been on two sides down there, but I know you're aware of those community tensions, but I think it's only really been happening in Cornwall. So we've had the Bibby Stockyard, I think that's its name, that was being refurbished down in Cornwall, and sort of that escalated things as well. And you've also had a hotel where they believe there was links to crime in relation to it. That's the only ones that we've had any major community tensions around. It has been quite well managed, I would say, between councils and the local police where you have had them.
Thank you. My point was, I suppose, when you have economic difficulty, sometimes this can then exacerbate other tensions within the community.
I'm not aware of any at this stage, but obviously as we move forward, I know, my mortgage is up for renew, and I know how much that's going to be going up over the next few. I think as the year goes on and we start to see it really starting to break, and we're all doing our budgets, and we're all going to be looking at council tax levels and putting potentially burdens on people in a cost of living crisis, I think it will start to unfold as we move forward. But we've not had anything specifically relating to the cost of living crisis or anything other than what you've had in Cornwall.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, turning to page 81, and in part in your response to Councillor Pemberley when you were talking about the blockers, if you like, the paragraph that references specifically around training, 313, can you tell me, is the Acting Chief Constable and senior officers, are they prioritising that need for training? Because I welcome your scrutiny very much. The remark that says that we cannot be sure that these experiences, i.e. experiences of police officers using language they perceive to be discriminatory, are entirely representative. Well, I think that's generous, anecdotally. And I think that, you've highlighted the importance of training. Is it seen as a priority?
Thank you, Chairman. Under the Acting Chief Constable, when he was the deputy, has actually done the first in the country. I mean, there's a lot of first in the countries in Devon and Cornwall, but he has led, and we had respect from Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary in their thematic report into misogyny, sexism and racism in policing, and their thematic report earlier this year did a cultural audit about how do officers and staff relate to our protected characteristics, how are we dealing with those, and there's subsequently been on the back of that a range of training and workshops for police officers and staff to attend about understanding the impact of how you are around people. I will say this specific issue about the use of language is in relation to transgender. It's not that the police have been racist to somebody on the streets. So, and we're all struggling with getting that right. So I would just like to let you know about that one. But the cultural audit and the training that it's quite intensive training and workshops that they've been doing with police officers and staff. It's quite concerning the level of time out of the office that they've been doing to do it, but I'm sort of holding firm that I'm sure it'll all come out all right in the end. But there is a lot of time being invested in training police officers and staff in this area.
Thank you. Councillor Banbury.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned barriers reporting hate crime, Commissioner. Does your office ever use other organisations where people can report hate crime? Do you collate any of the information, or does it have to be what it's, from police reports? I just think it would be, well, my personal feeling is that it would be useful if there were a comparison between what's reported via the police, via what's reported elsewhere, and surely the two working together would be very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The biggest issue that people can do now, and it's part of the need to promote, and in fact one of the team in our communications department is pretty much full-time on this, is about accessing victim support. So anyone, doesn't even have to go to the police, can go and access victim support, and they will assist you in reporting if you want to, or supporting you in relation to what's happened to you. So that's a big shift that wasn't available as widely as it is now. The force did have a number of third-party reporting organisations. I'm surprised, I'm just thinking, it's not in the report, so I can't be guaranteed that they still exist and are there, but they did have a number of third-party reporting organisations. For example, I'm sure it was the Refugee Council, for example, could report on behalf of refugees that had been victims of hate crime. But as it's not in the report, I can't be absolutely black and white in relation to that one.
Thank you. Can I just come back just quickly? I'm thinking of the ones I've just got a note of here: Stop Hate UK, Intercom Trust, and there's the Plymouth and Devon Race Equality Council as well. I mean, it might be that they're all included, but yeah.
That sounds like the ones. That they are still using. I'm just surprised we haven't highlighted it in
Thank
here.
you.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. I'll then propose we note that report from the chair. So I'll propose, do I have a second? Councillor Lever, all in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Councillor Toms, were you in favour? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was unanimous. Moving on to item 11, complaints against the Police and Crime Commissioner. Any questions? Have the report laid out? No? Okay, thank you. I propose we note the report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Unanimous, thank you. And the final item is our work programme moving forward. Councillor.
You won't be surprised to hear that I think we need to have a deep dive on ASB and how we address it. We've heard so much today about what the concerns are from our local communities, and I think we really do need to have a much greater understanding of what the issues are as a panel, because they're going to be differing from urban and rural settings. And I think we draw into it how our community safety partnerships are working, because as a member of a CSP in Northern Devon, it's been somewhat emasculated by the lack of funding that we used to have. And without it, we're just talking about the problems, but not really addressing and finding adequate solutions. So if we could look at those aspects I think we'll do our communities a great service.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion. Is the panel in broad agreement with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Toms.
Well, I made my request in the last thing, so if Ross can add that to the work programme, that'd be absolutely fine. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll just clarify rural crime. Yeah, that's the item. Okay. Again, is the panel sort of mainly supportive? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Commissioner, I know you had one or two ideas yourself.
To be fair, Chairman, I can't recall. I haven't written them down as I was speaking, and I hope my team have, so they might be able to assist. No, they're not. They're not on the ball today, Chairman.
Yeah. We'll
Just remembered one. It was drugs, wasn't it? You just might want to throw that in the pot in terms of consideration of some detailed understanding of the drugs at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Sort of committee in broad agreement again. Yeah. Again, we can sort of look back on that discussion and just double check. So, thank you very much, panel. I think that that concludes our business. If there's no other points for the work programme, which I don't think there are. No. Thank you for your attendance and see you at the next meeting. Thank you very much.